Okay, I think everyone's here now. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Mr. Bruniak, will you call the roll, please?
Mr. Brian Davis. Here.
Mrs. Jean Whitting. Oh, who's here? Ms. Shelley Arrett. Here. Mr. Matt Staley.
Here.
Mr. Bradley DeCamp.
Here.
Okay, we'll now entertain nominations from the board for the office of president. Anyone have a nomination to bring to the floor?
I nominate Brian Davis.
Brian Davis has been nominated. Are there any other nominations? I'll now entertain a motion to close the nominations for the office of president.
So moved.
I make a motion.
Is there a second?
So
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Those in favor of closing the motions, Mr. Bruniak, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Davis.
Same.
Mr. DeCamp.
Yes.
Mrs. Arrett.
Yes.
Mr. Staley.
Yes.
Mrs. Whitting.
Yes. Scott, did you hear me?
Yes, Jim, we got your vote.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Now you still. Now roll call and they need to say who they're voting for.
Okay, Mr. Bruniak, if you could please call the roll. Everyone should answer by stating the name of the person they're voting for.
Mr. DeCamp.
I vote for Mr. Davis.
Mrs. Arrett.
Brian Davis.
Mr. Staley.
Brian Davis.
Mrs. Whitting.
Brian Davis.
Mr. Davis.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Staley, Mrs. Arrett, and Mr. DeCamp, and Mrs. Whitting. I look forward to another fantastic year with working with all of you on the school board, and we're going to move forward with nominations for vice president. Item 4, if I could have a nomination for vice president. And do I have any nominations?
I nominate Matt Staley.
Matt Staley's been nominated for vice president. Have any other nominations?
Second.
Motion that nominations be closed for vice president. Do I have a motion?
I make a motion.
Mrs. Arrett, thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. DeCamp, thank you. Any discussion? Okay, hearing none. Mr. Bruniak, call the roll, please.
Mrs. Arrett.
Yes.
Mr. Staley.
Abstain.
Mrs. Whitting.
Matt Staley.
Mr. Davis.
Yes.
Mr. DeCamp.
Yes, Matt Staley.
Okay, motion carries. Vote on the vice president. Members should name the person you are voting for, please. Mr. Bruniak, if you would vote on the vice president, please.
Mr. Staley.
Abstain.
Mrs. Whitting.
Matt Staley.
Mr. Davis.
Matt Staley.
Mr. DeCamp.
Matt Staley.
Mrs. Eric.
Matt Staley.
Okay, Matt Staley is declared Vice President. Congratulations, Matt.
Thank you.
Item 5, board appointments. Number 1, appointment of 2 members of the Board of Education to serve as a 2021 Standing Committee for Revisions of the Board of Education Policy Manual and Administrative Regulations. The Superintendent will be the 3rd member of this committee.
I would like to continue.
Mrs. Eric?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Any other members?
I'd like to continue as well.
Jean? Okay. Mrs. Whiting, thank you. Item 2, appointment of the North Union Board of Education Legislative Liaison to the state and the OSBA for the 2021 calendar year. Who do we have for that, for this? Mr. DeCamp. Mr. DeCamp, is that, were you,
I thought that was.
Mr. Staley?
Legislative.
Oh,
Legislative, I'm sorry.
Mr. DeCamp, is that something you would,
Is it for student achievement or for legislative?
legislative?
Yes, I would be willing to serve.
Okay. Mr. DeCamp will serve as the legislative liaison to the state and the OSBA for the 2021 calendar year. Thank you, Mr. DeCamp. Item 3, appointment of a North Union Board of Education Student Achievement Liaison to the OSBA for the 2021 calendar year.
I'd be interested in that.
Mr. Staley, thank you. Mr. Staley will serve as the Student Achievement Liaison to the OSBA. Item 4, appointment of 1 member of the North Union Board of Education to be the OSBA Business Delegate for the 2021 calendar year. Was that myself? Was that the, I will continue to be the business delegate. Item 5, appointment of an alternate to the OSBA Business Delegate for the 2021 calendar year. Was that you, Mr. Staley? Okay. Continue with that, please. Thank you. Item 6, appointment of the Treasurer, Superintendent, and Board President to serve as the North Union Local School District's Records Commission for the 2021 calendar year. Item 7, appointment of 1 sexual harassment grievance officer for the 2021 calendar year, Mr. Brown. Any discussion on that? Okay. Item 8, appointment of 1 Title IX grievance officer, non-discrimination on the basis of race, color, religion, or national origin for the 2021 calendar year. Again, Mr. Brown. Any discussion? Okay. Appointment of 1 504 grievance officer, non-discrimination on the basis of disability for the 2021 calendar year. Again, Mr. Brown will be our member for that. Item 10, appointment of 2 members to serve as the 2021 Standing Committee on Finance Audit Committee. The treasurer will also be a member. The superintendent shall be ex officio member. 2 members for the Standing Finance Audit Committee. Who did we have serve this past year?
And with Brad on that?
Yeah, I was on. I would be willing to continue.
Mr. DeCamp, okay. Thank you.
We're meeting the same, is that right?
Correct. Yes, thank you. Yep, thank you. And item 11, appointment of 1 member to serve as board parliamentarian. Do I have anyone interested in being the board parliamentarian? Mr. Staley? Yep, okay. Thank you. Okay, so our appointment's done. Item 6, reports and presentations. The vision and mission of North Union Schools is to prepare, challenge, and empower together with our community, preparing students for a changing world, challenging students to grow, and empowering students to achieve with purpose. 6B, coronavirus update. Mr. Baird, Superintendent.
Thank you. Good evening. I'd like to start with current numbers within our school district. We've had a total of 579 students quarantined, students and staff quarantined cumulatively through January. We've had 41 students or staff in isolation due to a positive case of the coronavirus through today. We currently have 1 staff member and 3 students in isolation due to being positive to COVID-19, and we have 4 staff members and 51 students in quarantine. We had our weekly health department meeting this morning. The health department updated me. The governor came out with an announcement that classroom exposure could allow us to not quarantine students due to classroom exposure. The orders still are not out on that or finalized, so we're still looking at that. Looking at our numbers, if you remember, I think it was a kindergarten class, maybe a 3rd grade class were quarantined. That would prevent that whole class from happening that way. And what's in question right now are the distances. So it's possible that even though, like, for example, we're in class full time and we're within 6 feet of each other, as long as everybody has masks on, we would not have to quarantine within the classroom. Okay? That doesn't cover anything outside of school. So if the exposure is outside of the classroom, then they would still have to quarantine. Okay? Does that make sense to everyone?
So, if the dividers have to be used or not used or still mandatory?
So the order is that everything that we had in place stays in place. The distance is the only thing that's in question.
Okay. So the schools that dividers. So the schools that don't have dividers have to have a further distance?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
Our schools in Union County, what was recommended to us is that we facilitate dividers within 6 feet of each other.
Recommended.
Yes. With that being said, as we approach the next 2 weeks, we're going to have to be cautious in looking at our numbers. And I think it's a good possibility and time to discuss with the board, a time for students to come back to full time. And semester time would be a good time to look at that, which would be January 19th is a Tuesday, as a time that we could start looking at that, okay? And it can be done in phases, it can be done in groups, depending on what that looks like. And that's up for board discussion. I'm meeting with the Labor Relations Committee, I believe early next week, to discuss this further. But our hope is that we can get our kids back and full time.
Discussion now?
Sure, yeah.
Mr. Staley, any discussion on going back full time in a couple weeks?
Yeah, when I saw that decision by the governor, that was the first thing that jumped to my mind, is this might accelerate our timeline a little bit. I know it didn't, it wouldn't have affected the quarantines that we've had over the past few months, but it certainly, it would help. It helps us. It gives us another tool so that we can get the kids back in school. I'm pretty excited about it. I think it's a very real possibility as long as the numbers hold where they are right now.
Yeah, that numbers have stabilized.
Yeah.
No, I'm in favor. As soon as we can get the kids back, I think it's a good idea for everybody.
Mrs. Wedding, you have any?
No, I can, my only thoughts are, if it seems to be our health department, I would concur. Get them back as soon as we can.
Okay. Mr. DeCamp?
I concur with the other members. I think as soon as we can safely get them back, the better.
Thank you. Mr. Baird, sorry. Is there any discussion about eliminating spring break? Is there any discussion on that?
I have not discussed that with labor relations. We're going to have a labor relations meeting early next week.
Is there any discussion on some buildings doing not what other buildings, for example, would it make sense for the high school to, because of the athletics, for example, because of the exposure that some of a good majority of our kids have outside the classroom, would it allow them to potentially have a greater chance of not having exposure in the classroom, even though we've had low exposure in our high school, in all of our buildings.
Yes.
We still have to think about the exposure that our high school kids have outside of the classroom, whether it be robotics or athletic events. So I would entertain that when you have the labor relations discussion, that if elementary is back 5 days a week, there's a possibility that middle school and or high school, or elementary and middle school, but maybe not high school, is back full time.
So that has been directly discussed, but that is definitely an item to discuss. Here's another part of that. So the elementary school has the ability to cohort. The middle school has the ability to cohort, but not quite as much as the elementary school. And the high school kids are really intermixing quite a bit. Now, the classroom, again, exposure, and we haven't seen the research yet, but based on the announcement of the governor, is that the exposure at the high school, as long as we find or at the buildings, as long as we use all the precautions, isn't as bad. But just like what you said, there is a possibility that we could look at phasing it in, like bring our elementary back first, maybe our middle school in second, but we will have those discussions moving forward. I alerted the principals and the president of the union yesterday. We discussed the possibility of coming back. So it's already on their minds. We're thinking about it, so we will get that input moving forward. And after the board discussion today, I wanted to give our families an idea that we are thinking about it, because I didn't want to spring it on them, the day of or 48 hours. I wanted to discuss it.
Well, with that being said, we are getting closer to that day. Is there a time frame that you do have in mind to have a final decision? Is that something you would want the board to come back, reconvene and vote on? Or is that something that you feel like you make a decision in the next?
I think based on the parameters, having the discussion with labor relations, looking at the input from our community throughout the year, and looking at our numbers, because we're not going to know what the numbers have done. Maybe the holiday caused the jump, maybe it didn't. The health department couldn't tell us one way or another this morning. I will have another meeting with the health department next Wednesday. So after that meeting, and I feel comfortable with them, I can I think we can make a solid decision at that point as to where we could go.
Any other discussion on getting our kids back in school?
I just think it's really important that they do, and I think it helps the families. I think it helps the kids. I think it helps the teachers. I think it helps everybody to get people back into a routine and be socializing with each other.
And the last part of the health department update, and thank you for that, Shelley. The last part of the health department update is that we have a vaccination plan, but not a timeline in place yet. So all of our employees are on the next list to be vaccinated. That will happen from the Union County Health Department, and that will happen at the Union County Fairgrounds. Teachers will be sent a link, and it'll be open to the educational facilities in Union County, and they will be able to make an appointment. And they will extend their hours to after school hours, or they're already set up for after school hours, so they can go and get that done, those who choose. We did a survey of our staff. About 65% of the staff do believe that they will receive the vaccine. And that could happen, there's no timeline yet set, but as early as 2 weeks from now.
So is the board okay with Mr. Baird? Do we want to set a date? We want to know by a certain date for our community's sake? Do we want to do another survey? Do we just want to wing it, let the staff and Mr. Baird decide? How do we want to handle this decision? Principals, do you have any input? Mrs. Allison, Mr. Burgraff, Mrs. Chapman, any input for the board on that? Going back?
You might want to mute yours.
Go ahead, Doc.
We are prepared to do whatever you have us doing. We said that there was talk of us possibly going 4 days with one off, and I expressed I think our staff would rather just go 5 days all in. Providing everybody's going to be safe and everybody's healthy is what I said today. I said, providing our stats stay where they're at and such, we will plan to move forward.
And I will second that. I feel like the students have done a tremendous job of working within the COVID protocols, wearing their masks and social distancing. And I'm just super impressed with their efforts, and thank you parents for sending your kids prepared. So I feel like we haven't had bad transmission in the high school. And if we just keep doing what we're doing, I feel confident we'll be okay. And I think kids have expressed they were very grateful for the 100% return that we had in the fall. And every day that the kids can get in person, they want it. So I think our student body would be very pleased to be able to be back.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Berger.
And I believe the same thing. Our staff, our students have done an excellent job. You know, they do what we ask them to do. They participate. And educationally, that is a sound decision to get them back in the classroom so that we don't have more gaps than what we are perceived at this point.
Great. Thank you. It sounds like the administration is all on the same page. Mr. Baird will have a discussion with the association.
I can put out a quick survey too. Our parents are really good at responding quickly to a quick survey, and I have a feeling that hasn't changed much since before, but I can always see if it does change, and I can do a quick survey pretty quick. And I can conduct that starting tomorrow night and close by Friday.
Great.
Brian.
So I have a question. So we had where some of the kids were coming back, some of the kids chose to stay away. So is this going to affect, the kids who want to come back that didn't come back before to the classroom? So like if they were on virtual for like a half a semester, are we going to allow the ones who still want to come back?
So we've had I think we feel pretty good about, we've closed our window to sign up for second semester digital learning. And I think we're pretty comfortable with that. We reached out to all the families that were in it. We reached out, we talk about the appropriateness of that. And we ask that they maintain that choice throughout the semester. Now, circumstances arise that change that. And our guidance counselors and our principals are very good about having those individual conversations about what's best for the kids at that point. So as circumstances change, maybe a relative moves into the household, or maybe somebody else, something happens within, or circumstances change. And our guidance counselors and principals have been excellent about having those conversations. So I think we feel pretty good about the numbers going in.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Go ahead and mute Shelley. Go ahead and mute your mic. That's okay. All right, great discussion. thank you for all your input, and it sounds like we will know hopefully by the middle of next week.
Wednesday.
We'll know by Wednesday. We'll know by next Wednesday, a week from today, what level we'll be on as a district moving forward.
And I think we need to plan on the return, but then we look at the numbers. And I think it's a good time to let people know 2 weeks ahead. I asked the principals and the directors to put together short updates for the staff too about what's been going on, or for the board, what's been going on in their buildings as well. So Erica, if you could talk about that or begin that.
Yeah. And I was gonna say, you're gonna turn yours up, or if I turn mine up, I can play it through there.
Sorry.
That's okay. I have this fear that it's not gonna do anything but make sound, so. Oh, oops. Wrong side, sorry. And it is really turned up. Oops. About that. I had the sound set up and now I'm not so sure. All right, so I think it is. We'll see here in just a moment. So we're going to go through for you the impact of COVID-19 and how it's affected our learning process and our goals that we've been working on. So this is the administrative team will be working together. We're really focusing on two of our strategic goals, the student programming along with student wellness. So that's where our focus has been. You're going to see a lot of this between the academics and the SEL. How do we balance these two things throughout this process? And so we're going to start with North Union Elementary with Mrs. Allison and Mr. Markham, and then Mrs. Borders and Haley, or Ms. Dumoulin are going to be there as well. I'm hoping, yeah, when they start talking. So as soon as Mrs. Allison starts on the next one, and I can't see her anymore, so I'm hoping we can coordinate this beautifully as we go. So
I'm here.
Mrs. Allison, would you like to start? And we'll see if we can hear you.
First of all, I'd like to say thank you and Happy New Year to everyone.
Okay. I might have to turn this down.
And the public that is watching. And we are excited to present this tonight. Can everyone hear?
Somebody's microphone.
It is. Sorry. What up? I can't get it.
Go ahead, Dar.
Okay, I'll start over again. I'd just like to say Happy New Year to everybody. And we hope that 2021 brings us great things this year. And tonight I have with me and helping present with our team is Brent Markham, our assistant principal, and Haley Dumoulin, our school counselor, who is also a part of our core team and does a lot with the SEL in our building. So who better to present for the SEL portion. So we'll go ahead and start. If you'll go to the next slide, which would be the 100% model, the 100% model. Mr. Markham's going to talk to you about that.
So good evening again. My name is Brent Markham. First off, I just want to thank everyone for the opportunity. Also, just want to thank our staff and students for all their accommodations and, going through the 100% model. I mean, our students have been so good with wearing masks in that model as well as the others, and also staff. So I feel like there's a lot of strengths here. So talking with the 100% model, which is funny because that's what the meeting discussion was earlier. So just some background knowledge here at the elementary. So our classroom sizes are from 18 to 25 students, depending on grade levels. Students are encouraged to a social distance when possible. Our teachers, we want to make sure they stay in their instructional pods or, in the front of the classrooms when teaching. We try to do the best we can with that. Trifolds, plexiglass, and dividers are utilized in the classroom and cafeteria and in our related arts. So, we have our double protection with mask and plexiglass within our full model. Also, we, our staff try to do the best we can to take the mask breaks that are offered within the classroom, and we always have replacement masks for our staff and students as needed. So we've done an excellent job with that. Also, a big drive of this is we're able to restore our normalcy for students by offering, our extracurriculars. We've had our elementary cross country. We've had our VEX. They're actually going to host a competition in the elementary gym on January 30th. And then we've had youth basketball. And then also our students have been able to be back out on the recess. So we've had our playground divided into sections. So then they're using the same equipment all week, so we can always assure contact tracing. And then last thing is just with the 100% model, we have our students in school and, social skills being worked on and the normalcy for our students. So 100% model, that's some of the successes we've had there. So I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Allison for the next part. So again, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any questions on the 100% model for us before we move on? Okay. Hybrid model, which is what we are currently in right now, our class sizes are around 7 to 13, depending on the grade level. Our grades 4 and 5 have an exceptionally large amount of students compared to K through 3. So that's why you see the difference in numbers there, 7 to 13. Through the hybrid model, we've been able to reduce class size, which allows for the 6 feet of social distancing in the classroom, hallways, and related arts. We can assure that is absolutely happening. We're fortunate in that our classrooms are large for the most part, so especially the K through 2, they have the smaller class sizes, like 7 to 8, 9. So that's perfect for that setup. Teachers are able to provide more learning opportunities, such as the small group, the guided reading, individualized instruction, because you can spread them out and you're able to, as a teacher, keep your distance as compared to staying in an instructional pod and trying to teach from the front of the room. And I say trying because I've had numerous teachers say, what's going to happen if I circulate? Because it's in our nature. And I say this from being a former elementary teacher, it is hard to stay at the front of the classroom and teach students. You've got to move around. So I understand that. And I said, you know what, we just got to do the best that we can do. Wednesdays have been utilized for office hours. Intervention is provided for our vulnerable students. We've had collaboration between grade level teams and digital academy teachers. Because as you know, at the elementary, we have digital academy teachers assigned that they aren't dealing with classroom and digital academy. They're strictly dealing with digital academy. So that gives them a chance to collaborate with their grade level team and catch up with in comparing where they're at as to where the actual classroom teacher is. The trifolds and plexiglass dividers are utilized in the classroom just like they are in the 100% model. The paw prints on the wall are a visual cue for the social distancing in the hallways. We have them spaced 6 feet apart, and the students find themselves under a paw print. And believe it or not, people at the beginning were really like, how are they going to do this? Those kids know as soon as they are called to line up, they get right under a paw print. So they do an excellent job, and the teachers have done an excellent job with reinforcing that as well. The mask breaks are still offered in the classroom, and replacement masks are distributed as needed. We probably distribute, I don't know what the other schools do, but we go through a lot of masks. It's interesting to watch students get out of the cars in the morning and they've got their face up like this because they know they forgot their mask, and we've all done it. I don't know about you guys, but I've gotten out of the car to go to the store or whatever, and I'm like, and you got to run back and put your mask on. So we've got the same thing going there. It's all good though. And also, we've been able to restore the normalcy, just like Brent mentioned, in the 100% by offering the cross country, the VEX, the youth basketball, plus some other things that Haley's going to talk about Ms. DeMolin, I should say, in our social emotional slide. She's going to talk a little bit about that. Some other things that we've been able to put back into place. Also, our playground is still divided in the hybrid model as well. So that pretty much wraps up our hybrid model. Before we go to the next slide, does anyone have any questions for Mr. Markham or myself in regards to either the 100% model or the hybrid model?
And also, hey, Mrs. Allison, I also want to mention, so in our hallways as well, where when we have 100%, students are still social distance within the hallways as well with the paw prints, just those lines continue, they're much longer, but we still have those paw prints. I kind of teased and said we're from one end of the school to the other, but they're still used there as well.
Correct. Okay. All right. Ms. DeMolin?
Great. Thank you. So as far as social emotional goes, here in the elementary, we are utilizing the second step curriculum. Thankfully, the district was able to buy new curriculum for us to use this year. So we're using the most up-to-date, current, tech-savvy version of second step. All of our materials are online. All of the media is online, which is great. Our teachers have been able to utilize that curriculum, whether our students are at home or in the classroom. So when we're in hybrid model, that looks a little chaotic, but we're getting it done. Our teachers are on a delayed schedule, so it's a 1 hour delay schedule, and we start every Monday and every Thursday off with an hour of SEL. Those activities are focused on skills for learning, empathy, emotion management, problem solving, all of those skills that align with the standards that the state has set for elementary social emotional learning. If we move back to the 100% model, that will look like 1 hour on Mondays. We'll have that delay, so it'll only be, or they'll still get the same amount of direct instruction. It'll just be one time a week instead of the two. The follow-through activities that our teachers utilize revolve around both PACS and the second step curriculum. So we're incorporating that common language throughout our days at school and our days at home. We know that consistency is the highest priority for our kiddos, as well as maintaining their health and safety. So when we are in hybrid or 100% model, we have those same expectations for our kids. Our barriers and our mask policy remains the same. Our teachers are accessible to our students and families, whether the kids are at school or they're at home. We're continuing those supports like blessings in a backpack, thanks to our transportation department. Mr. Nauman has done a great job of coordinating. If we have kids in quarantine, blessings in a backpack has still been delivered to them. If we have kids that are in Digital Academy that have been involved in the program, they're getting what they need as well. Our Big Brothers, Big Sisters partnership has been able to continue. We're offering the Lunch Buddies program virtually on Tuesdays. And like I mentioned earlier, we're still using that PACS language every day, whether our kids are at home or in person with us.
Thank you, Haley. Does anyone have any questions for Ms. DeMolin? All right, that concludes our portion for the elementary. And once again, I just want to give a shout out to our guidance counselors, our custodians, our cooks, our bus drivers, and of course our teachers and our other support staff. We couldn't be successful if it wasn't for them. So again, shout out to them publicly. Thank you.
Mrs. Allison, sorry about that. Mrs. Allison, Mr. Markham, and Ms. DeMolin, we appreciate everything you're doing for our young kids and our young people. And just curious, what's the biggest challenge, for lunch, for example, or what's the biggest challenge that you're going to face when we bring them back 100%, or that you're seeing? Do we have many kids, I guess, falling behind in our curriculum? Are you seeing some warning signs with being on hybrid, and getting them back 100% is going to help out with some things? We're just curious on where we're at academically, I guess. You touch on that a little bit.
I'm sure that we have had students fall behind. That would be a lie to say no. But do I think it's possible to bring them back up to where they need to be? Absolutely. we've done, I keep saying this, I feel like our teachers, for not knowing what was expected in the spring, did a remarkable job. Our MAP scores indicated that in accordance with the national norms, I feel like we did a great job, and we've continued. And we're actually getting ready to take the MAP test starting this coming week through the end of the month. So that's where we're really going to be able to put out some good data and show whether we have, where we've fallen behind and what we need to do. But I will tell you this, we are prepared to hit the ground running. And how we're going to meet those students' needs as we see what they need. Our biggest thing that I'm looking forward to, and I know the rest of the staff and everyone else is in the same, we're looking for the consistency piece. And we feel like once we get that consistency piece there, we know that we're going to be able to conquer this. So instead of looking at challenges, we're looking at how we're going to be more, the consistency piece and how we can really get going and go with it. So hopefully no more interruptions.
And we know at the end of the day, we can do what's best for kids at any level. I mean, I feel like we're very strong at any of the three levels, and we can do what's best for kids at any of those levels, for sure.
Correct.
Allison, I have one question for you. Okay. So how is our staff at this time, like let's say we can't go full time. So what are we going to do to help these kids get to where they need to be if we do not go back?
I'm glad you asked that, Shelley, because we actually had a plan. We have been bringing in our vulnerable students on Wednesdays and working with them, but we had an even greater plan that should our numbers, drop off, we are ready to go. And this is where not only do the teachers need commended, but also the bus drivers and Mr. Nauman, because he coordinates the transportation to get all these kiddos in here. So we bring them in, and we have plans to continue to do that. I've also went ahead and added back on one Wildcat reader and possibly two more. Obviously, with the situation, some of them really don't want to come back into the building yet, and I understand that. But we are looking at bringing them back into the picture and just trying to get as many people back in that can support us with our needs for those students. Does that help? Okay.
Great discussion. Thank you for your presentations. And Mr. Burgraff next, or
Yep.
Oh, Eric. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I would like to start really with our social emotional. I just want to start with our social and emotional learning on the next slide. We are also following that second step curriculum. And I did give each of you board members a packet with some of the handouts that our staff is using. Our team, our leadership team for our SEL, Mrs. Draper, Mr. Myers, Mrs. Lawrence, and also our new social worker, Jenny Scott, have put together a really good plan. And I've been able to be in some of the classrooms, and I've actually seen all three of those handout lessons that you guys received from me. So, as we look at this, the first piece that's in there is a self-awareness student reflection rubric. And all of our students are filling those out. And it is a lot of goals, a lot of different pieces. And those are a lot of the emotional things that students go through as they go through the middle school. So it's important that we do address those. But as you can see, the piece from the sixth grade, and I know Mr. Souter is the one that did that lesson responding to cyberbullying. He also did that with his digital students. So it's one of those things, he was able to provide some of that. Now, some of these topics we aren't necessarily doing with our digital students because of the emotional nature of that. But with that, we're also trying to provide them the second one, dealing with creating new pathways in the brain, Mr. Myers taught to all of his students. And it just gives them a chance to actually interact with others and also talk with the teacher and put some of their own ideas down. One of the other things that we are looking at doing here in January is teaming up with Nationwide Children's Hospital and doing our signs of suicide with all of our 7th grade students again. And, it's one of those pieces that we feel very strongly. Our guidance department, our teachers, they do a good job of communicating with our students, working with our students, and that student wellness piece that's in our strategic plan. The third one there is something that happened in Mrs. Lawrence's class, and I was in there, and it deals with my strengths and my weaknesses. But it was great because each kid could do something individually, and Mrs. Lawrence was able to give them some ideas and different things, but all of the kids were able to come up with a strength, and that's a very positive for all of our students to be able to do that. And also it helps the teachers because they interact with each other and they know more interests of their students. So they're able to talk with kids every day. And that's one of the main goals here at the middle school is, having that adult that the students feel comfortable with and are able to talk to. So, we're doing a lot of things with our social emotional learning. In our teacher workday, we have a 2-hour session. We're doing some rotations of different things. Our teachers are providing a lot of those sessions to instruct other teachers and even our aides and other members of our staff here in the building. So I really feel we're trying to do a lot of things there to just keep in touch with all of our students as we go through these different levels, whether it's learning level 1, 2, or 3. We're continuing to do those things in our classrooms and even with our digital students. The second slide that I have there is I know last board meeting, there was some talk about, how are our digital kids doing and how can we give, you guys some information on that. And so I put in a slide really about our digital students. We started the year with 62 students. And it has fluctuated. As Mr. Baird said, there have been some students that needed to go to the digital side for whatever reason. And then we've had some students that really felt, that they could come back and do that. So that number started at about 62 and it's changed back and forth. Now with our latest survey, we are seeing that 10 students did request to return. And then we did have, for a number of reasons, 12 students selected the second semester remote option, and so there are many reasons. We are talking to them, whether it's the teachers, the guidance counselors, we are calling home. I know that over break, we talked to almost all of the 6th grade parents about what their student is seeing as positive, seeing as negative, some of those types of things, whether they want to return, whether they want to stay. But one of the interesting things as we put together our honor roll for the first 9 weeks is we saw that 47% of our students that were digital were either straight A's, honor roll, or merit roll. And, as the question was asked, are we still keeping up with those students? Our teachers are doing a great job with the Google Meets. They're doing a great job with the digital work and trying to work with students. There have been some setbacks. There have been some students. There have been some home visits where students just aren't doing the things that we're asking them to do. And sometimes it's the student fault. Sometimes it's, just what's going on right now in this pandemic. So, the students are doing a great job. One of the great things is, as already been mentioned, even our digital kids have been able to participate in things like VEX, our athletic teams, the choir. Our new choir instructor, Mrs. Blair, has done a great job doing Google Meets and instructing students, even in the choir, that are at home. So, we really are trying to do everything we can to make sure those students are still on pace. And, we know it's difficult for them. It's sometimes frustrating for the student. It's sometimes frustrating for the parent. It's sometimes frustrating for the teacher, but we're doing everything we can to make sure that we're staying up with them. And the last piece on there, our second semester from our forms and everything we have right now, we will have 56 middle school students on the digital side, fully remote. And then next, talking about the different things, I did throw in a couple pictures of some of the things going on with our hybrid setup. And ours is not really much different than the elementary school. You know, our classroom sizes are anywhere from 6 to 14 students. And with that, we are doing everything we can to maintain our distance. The teachers are providing many, many opportunities. Sometimes it's easier with a small group to do something where they can actually work with every individual kid on that lesson versus when they do have a full classroom. So they're doing a great job. Today was Working Wednesday. We did have 4 students in today working with teachers. And, you know, it's one of those things, whether it's our OG program dealing with students and their reading, or it is just making sure that they are up to date or know where they're at in each classroom. Those are the things that all of our teachers and our intervention specialists and our aides did today and have been doing with our Wednesdays. So the hybrid model, it is working. You know, in my opinion, we are slowing down a little bit we can't provide all the instruction in that 2-day period and then that 3-day remote period that we would with a full 5-day-a-week classroom. So, you know, as the question was asked, yes, we would love to get them back 5 days so that we can keep up with the pacing of our classrooms and the standards that we are looking at. But that's our hybrid model. And then finally, our 100% model, you know, our classrooms will be back up to speed to like 14 to 25. Our choir classroom may have just a few more students in that, but students are encouraged to do the social distancing. We cannot provide 6 feet, but all of our students are wearing their masks. All of our teachers, just as the elementary, are trying to stay in the front of the classroom and do the best they can with that piece also. But just as with our kids in today, you know, we have teachers working one-on-one with students and everybody's wearing masks, trying to stay behind the barriers. But, you know, it sometimes is a struggle to maintain that distance. We're using the dividers. We're using the paw prints on the floor. We're giving mask breaks. And, you know, we're doing everything we can to make sure that students are following the COVID guidelines. And as already been mentioned, our students are doing a great job. The teachers, you know, remind students and they follow in line. We haven't had issues where students are defiant on that. And so it makes us happy to know that the students want to be in school, and especially middle school students, that social part of school is very important to them. And they all keep saying to me, Mr. Berggraf, when is everybody coming back to school? When are they all coming back to school? And we say as soon as possible. So questions?
Thank you, Mr. Berggraf. Does any board members have any questions for Mr. Berggraf in his presentation?
Matt, this is Shelley. I have a question for you. So what are we doing in the junior high to promote good health? Sorry.
Well, we're doing everything we can to provide, you know, lunches for all the kids. We're making sure that even today, my cafeteria workers, we had kids come in from, say, there were some from 8 to 11. They provided lunches for those kids today. So, you know, it was one of those things. We knew they were coming. Our cafeteria staff, Mrs. Hoover, did a great job. She got those lunches. She brought them up here so the kids had them even before they left. We're doing the same thing with our blessings in a backpack, just like the elementary school, providing some of those things. And, you know, as I go around, we're talking with the kids about hygiene. You know, our health class has already focused on that. And, you know, they do a unit on diseases, things of that nature. It was a focus on COVID and, you know, just going in the gym. Mr. Andrews has it on his board. You know, you're coming in, you're using a hand sanitizer. The last thing on his board, it's number 5 or number 6, is use the hand sanitizer as you leave. So, you know, I can say middle school kids are very social. I can't keep every kid 6 foot apart all the time. It's just impossible. You know, that's their nature. But the teachers are doing a good job of providing that. You know, we're cleaning the desks. We're doing everything there. Our custodians do a great job at night. We have the barriers. and the students are following all those lines. But, the staff really does that. It is something that it's become second nature to them. I hear them all the time. Did you use a hand sanitizer? They're passing it out in the classrooms. As students leave, they have a bottle, kind of like that Dawn bottle, and they go around the classrooms. We're spraying off the desk. We're taking care of that. And then the kids are getting the hand sanitizer. So, we're doing everything we can to promote every piece of protocol that COVID-19 is asking us to do. And that's why, we don't have a lot of spread within the classroom.
Mr. Burgraff, you had mentioned that 47% of the kids that were doing remote learning were on the honor roll. And it's just for my own curiosity. Do you know how that compares to the rest of the students in the school?
Yeah, man, I did that too. We had 52% of the other kids. So, yes, we've had some glitches. We've had some problems with internet access. We've had some of those things. But I think that's very comparable, 52% and 47%.
I think it's admirable that it's that close, really. I'm surprised at that. Thank you.
Matt, I do have one more question. My question is, I saw where you're going to do the SOS. So sometime in the future, can we get an update on that, on how that project went?
Yeah, and that is a partnership. Our guidance counselors, our teachers, our 3 teachers are providing that, and then students go through that survey, and Nationwide helps us out, and they go and they score, they do the screenings. And, I know last year we did 62 triages of students who went through that screening. And we were just talking about that. Mrs. Mariucci and myself were talking about that the last couple of days, because we are going to be putting that letter out to our students. And, whether that's they're concerned about a friend, whether it's themselves, we just want to make sure we're taking care of every single kid that comes through this building.
I personally want to thank you guys for doing that, because I know it's been really successful at Tri-Rivers.
Hey, Mr. Burgraff, this is Brad. Thank you for all you're doing. I wanted to echo Ms. Sarrett's comments about the signs of suicide. I'm glad to see that we're going to be engaging the students with that as soon as we can with that. And I was thinking along the same lines that it would be interesting to get some type of comparison in terms of the number of kids that are tripping the screen and have to maybe get referred or receive some additional services compared to where we were in the past. The other thing I had a question about is I also wanted to commend you for taking on the cyberbullying. And I just wanted to ask, have you seen any increase or any further or increased dialogue or increased complaints about that particular issue as a result of that?
I don't think our numbers have increased with that. We do have 2 systems in place. We have a system called BARC and we have a system called Securely. I did make a phone call to a parent last evening on something that came through the internet. But, with the resources we have, and our tech department does a good job, they can keep track of a lot of different things. But I have not seen a real increase in that. Students are doing some talking back and forth, not necessarily school related. And that's to be expected a little bit with middle school kids and not seeing all their friends every day. But as in the cyberbullying, I don't see our numbers jumping.
Janelle, we can go ahead and start with the high school. Mrs. Chapman, thank you.
Okay, good evening. I would say the word for the high school this year is personalization. Not only is the high school very personalized just by the courses that students choose to take, whether they're advanced or AP or College Credit Plus, or they're, an art student, and, so many choices at the high school. We've had to be very personalized and very involved individually with students to make sure that they're getting their needs met. And so as we walk through the different models, you'll see how we've been able to do that. So I'll start with the 100% model. We averaged about 15 to 20 students per classroom. And that really depends on the grade level and also the course offering. But we tried to set up classrooms so that we had no more than 22 students a classroom. Our rooms are a little tight at the high school, many of them. So to provide for as much distancing as possible, we tried to cap our classroom size at 22. Students have done an absolutely amazing job of wearing their masks and being incredibly compliant with that. And we are so grateful to the students. I've told them that many times, but also to the parents who've supported our efforts in just keeping everybody safe. So I know there was a lot of parent support behind that, and we're grateful. Students have used trifolds when we cannot be 6 feet apart, and in the 100% model, because our classrooms are a little tighter, it's very difficult to keep a classroom and 22 kids 6 feet apart. So when we can't be 6 feet apart, we have used those trifolds. We also have the tape lines and stickers on the floor just to encourage social distancing. And we released like grades 9 and 10 on our first bell for class change and let them transition out of classrooms. And then we had a second bell at transition for the 11th and 12th graders so that we didn't have the entire student body transitioning at one time and converging on each other. And students were really great about working with those transitions so we didn't have everybody in the hallways at once. You can imagine that gets pretty tight. We also offered mask break to students in the classrooms, and we had replacement masks, but I wouldn't say that we were handing them out like crazy. I mean, students were, they came to school with them, like they were ready to go. And if they weren't, they kind of did what Dar said. They got off the bus and covered their face with their shirt or whatever and walked into the building, to the office, got their mask and went on their day. Like, masks were not an interruption to learning in the high school. The kids were absolutely amazing with them. We've been so impressed. We've also run a block schedule with an A day, B day schedule to limit the number of transitions in the hallways so that students are in class for a longer period of time, and they do 4 of their classes on A days, the other 4 of their classes on B days in longer periods, and that just reduces the number of transitions students have had to have in the hallways. Students reported in a survey, and I'll share some data with you, that they really appreciate any day that they can be in school, whether it's hybrid or 100%. They would much rather be in school than they would be working remotely from home. And so that came back very loud and clear in the November survey that I gave to students. And they were really grateful for every day that we got to be in the 100% model. And I think that's so good for their social and emotional health and well-being to be 100% and with their peer groups. So as soon as we can get back there, I know they would appreciate it. And we were very thankful that athletics and extracurricular activities were able to proceed. So I know the VEX students were super happy to see VEX get launched. We had athletics kind of going along, and VEX was very eager to get going. We had some of our biggest numbers for students of service this year, of students participating. They did a mask drive to hand out. They worked with Care Train. A huge number of kids working to serve others during COVID, which I thought was pretty darn awesome. Next slide. In the hybrid model, dependent upon, so we cohorted families to bus them, we cohorted kids by family group to bus them in. So I wouldn't say we had an actual even split on the group 1 days versus the group 2 days. So sometimes we had a few more students in the building, maybe in group 1 than group 2, but we averaged about 5 to 10 students a classroom on the hybrid days. Students continued to follow all of the safety protocol, and again, amazing job. When we are hybrid, in most classrooms, we don't have to use the trifolds because class size is smaller and we can seat them 6 feet apart, which is kind of nice in that respect. Teachers report in a survey that I did with the staff that the block schedule, having a longer period with the students and also the smaller class size during hybrid, really allowed them to build more personal relationships with students. And so even when we had to have online days, the teachers really felt like in those block periods on that hybrid schedule with smaller class sizes, like they really got to know some students on a deeper level than they might have otherwise. So we found that was a benefit. Let's see. And I think our teachers really need to be commended, as I know that you did with your resolution. They took a tremendous leap forward with their online instruction, as we all did. Like, I think we all have grown so much with our comfort level with technology and just trying new things. The growth mindset of our teachers is to be commended. I worked a lot of other places and with wonderful people, but I would just put our staff up against any staff I've worked with as far as their let's roll up our sleeves, growth mindset, let's figure this out. I don't hear complaining. I don't hear we can't. I hear how do we make this happen? If it's good for kids, they're behind it. And I am so grateful. I could not ask for more. On remote days, students reported in a survey, so on their remote days when they were not in the hybrid model, when they were not at school and they were working remotely from home, I asked students some questions about, do you know how to access Google Classroom to find your assignments and your due dates? And students reported that Google Classroom was pretty easy to navigate. They could find their classes, their assignments. They knew where their due dates were. They knew how to reach out to their teacher. So the majority of students felt like Google Classroom was very, very successful. Previously in the spring, we had two modes, two platforms. We had Schoology and Google Classroom. That caused quite a bit of confusion for kids. Is it Schoology? Is it Google Classroom? Erica and our coaches trained us in how to use Google Classroom in a very similar way across all teachers. And students said, wow, way better. One platform and everyone's using it pretty much the same way. So that was good feedback to get. All right, next slide. This is some student survey data from November 2020. It's a little bit hard to see there, so maybe we could share this with you through email so you could see it better. But we were asking students, like I said, how easy was it for you to find your assignments in Google Classroom? Did you feel like the workload is manageable? Because in the spring of last year, I felt like students were overwhelmed. And so we had to, as a staff, back it down a little bit. And so students, for the most part, said that they do feel like the workload has been manageable. They feel supported by their teachers. So I think we kind of struck the right balance. The students were feeling pretty positive about being able to manage the workload. All right, next slide. And as far as social emotional support, you'll see there's more survey data there. So in November, and I have one ready to launch right at the beginning of next semester, another survey to follow up to this one, where we ask students, how is your social emotional well-being? And would you like a counselor to reach out to you? And what is validating to us is students that we have been kind of on our radar that we're concerned about and we're checking in with anyway are the same students who were showing that they wanted to be checked in on. So this made us feel good that we have a decent handle on who needs our support and wants our support. And a couple kids, said, yeah, please reach out to me, and we reach out to them. Our social worker is doing a lot of individualized Google Meets with students. Ohio Guidestone, and we are making referrals for students and families who are wanting additional mental health support, maybe greater than what like a school social worker could provide. So we have a new navigator that we're working with through Ohio Guidestone. And so we have that kind of pipeline to extra support when we need it, which has been really nice. And teachers also, we have been doing regular intervention as assistant team meetings. So those are ongoing. We've been using our working Wednesdays for that. That's been great because we have such a longer amount of time to meet and really talk about kids. So through the IAT process, we're identifying some students' social emotional needs. For some of our students on 504 plans who have executive functioning struggles, students with autism, all of this switching kind of back and forth with different learning modes. And then the hybrid learning has been really, really hard for them. So we've assigned teachers to the 504 students to just help them structure themselves and just make sure they're making progress. And we've just been trying through the IAT process to try different interventions for kids who are struggling with, I don't go to school 3 days a week, but then I come back after a long weekend and suddenly I go to school for 2 weeks and the schedule is just struggling, a real struggle. So we've been working just creatively to try to find what works for each individual kid. It's been very individualized, very personalized this year. And I think we need to keep the spirit of that. I think we've learned some things that really work. And I think it's relationship on a personal level. Having extracurricular activities may be one of the single best things for social emotional health is that the fact that we were able to bring VEX back. We were able to have SOS, that In the Know can meet, that all these groups, that choir can do some things, has been huge for kids, huge for them. And then, like I said, I'm going to do a follow-up survey in January, right at the beginning of the next semester, to kind of come back to these things from the first survey and check in with kids again, and make sure we're still on target with them. Questions for me about the high school?
Janelle, this is Jean.
Yeah.
Have you had a chance, and I know you're tremendously busy, but have you had a chance to look at students' GPAs from previous years as compared to this year? And are they comparable?
So we will have grades in, we should have grades reported to us by January 15th. So that is on our agenda to do. So we will have the semester grade at that point. We were in pretty good shape going into the end of the first quarter because we got to be face-to-face. But we've had a longer period now of having the hybrid, and then we were remote for a while for this quarter. So I don't have hard data to give you. I know I met with the intervention assistance teams. Today was like intervention assistance team day for Digital Academy and for our face-to-face students. And it sounds like teachers are really giving students these 2 weeks at the end of the semester to get caught up. And we're giving them grace. Teachers are really being flexible, and as long as students are showing effort and they're showing a level of mastery on the learning, teachers are accepting it. Students are able to hand things in a little later, so depending upon the teacher, they've extended deadlines. I asked all the teachers, I send a newsletter out every Sunday, and I did ask them for this week to meet with every student who has missing work, kind of like give them a Post-it note or give them something and just put it in front of them. Can they look it up in Google Classroom? They can, but do they always? Sometimes not. So to kind of do that short little individual conference with him, each student, here's what's missing, it's on a Post-it note, send an email to that parent, and then give the student time in class to get some things made up. So I'll have data for you.
Okay.
After January 15. Yeah.
Okay. That would be great. Thank you, Janelle.
Yep.
Janelle, I'm going to ask you the same questions I asked Matt and I know I've asked you this question before, but so what can we do more to help promote good health in the high school? I mean, whether you're in, hybrid or whether we're in, full go of education. So, are there creative things that we could possibly do? And I personally are asking this because I feel like their good health for them is what's going to help them through pandemics, even from now and in the future.
Mm-hmm. I know we have a wellness committee through our district that has, before pre-COVID, was planning to do some wellness awareness things, like even bringing in different foods for kids to try that they might not otherwise try, and just to have kind of monthly health focuses in health awareness. I think that's something that would be really good to revisit, and maybe even have a student club that might be around that, or our nursing students could pick that up. our nursing students did do like a little survival kit of like tissues and hand cleaner and things like that for the staff with a note about how to stay safe. And so as they develop their program, I think that would be a great thing for our nursing staff because they are going to be practitioners who have to teach people how to be healthy. And I talked to the nursing teacher about this. Could they be kind of our health ambassadors at the high school to, as a part of their coursework, create these public service announcements or presentations and things for us about healthy living and healthy habits? So I think that's something that is in the works. COVID disrupted some of our planning. But I definitely think, I do agree that we could probably do more to talk about not just mental health, but physical health and, you know, are you getting enough sleep and eating properly and that kind of thing as a wellness theme for us.
Also, Janelle, and maybe Thomas is on there and he can explain it a little bit more. We've also have community partners that are providing lessons on babysitting, and I'll let Thomas talk about that, or Janelle. I think you both are aware. You guys have been working together to get some things together for some of our students.
Yes. So basically, Marysville School District, Fairbanks, and us got together to work with the American Red Cross for it's called Babysitting Basics. And basically, we prepaid to have 10 of our students that will get this course, and it basically shows them how to take care of an infant or a toddler. They get CPR certification, they get first aid, they get AED, they get a lot of those mental health, just help skills, so they can help with babysitting. The thought process behind it was, since we are such a close-knit community, was to have it so we can have members of our own community, our own students, go out and help other people that are struggling. If we are in the hybrid model and both parents have to go to work for an hour, whatever the case may be, just so we have other options out there. And I thought that this would be a great endeavor for us to definitely partner with the other two districts, just so we can add that level of independence for our students and give them extra skills.
We did have a handful of students work with a group in Marysville, the PASS Foundation and Gatekeepers, where our students who are interested in being mental health professionals, potentially as a career, received training over the summer and information about what it would like to be different types of healthcare professionals and mental health providers. And so those students work with our school counselor and social worker. They're a group called Gatekeepers. They are suicide prevention and just overall mental health wellness. And so they have things in the works. Mrs. Patterson could speak to it better, but doing something this spring for just overall mental health wellness and kind of like our kindness week that we've had in the past. But I was kind of excited to see our students be able to participate in something that we're talking about mental health careers, because it is an in-demand job. Career field, and we have 6 really passionate ladies about this in our high school who are going to be doing some great things. So expect to see some work from them this spring.
Okay, Janelle, I have one more question for you. Yes. So are we going to be, is the high school going to be doing the SOS?
We had not gotten that scheduled just because we didn't know what model we were going to be in. And the last thing we wanted to do was do it when we were hybrid and couldn't keep an eye on kids. So I know Mrs. Patterson has her contacts at Nationwide Children's, and I was letting her kind of work the schedule, but we did not want to do it when we thought we could still be hybrid, because if we do it, we want to have eyeballs on kids for that solid week, and not have them like do it and then go home, which I'm sure, you know, Matt is the same way. So Mrs. Patterson has her contacts at Nationwide. We haven't scheduled anything because we didn't know what our schedule was. We want to be 100% if we're doing that, preferably.
Yeah, Mrs. Chapman, thank you for your presentation. I just have a couple quick questions. The first, I love that you touched on culture and relationships. I have that always written at the top of my my notes when I take notes, but what are we doing for our staff to build culture and relationships, not only with our kids, but to have that relationship with the kids, we've got to have the right culture and relationships with our staff, Mr. Baird and yourself and Mr. Burgraff and Mrs. Allison as well. So what are we doing at the high school, I guess, to build those relationships with our
I think if you ask high school staff, the culture in our building is really good. Like I said, I have not seen a staff with a more can-do attitude. I think that just fun things is, sadly, we can't do our staff luncheon anymore because we can't all be sitting together. But, we do things like I bring in food and, we just have a day where we're able just to have lunch and just take care of ourselves and pamper ourselves a little bit. The building leadership team organized a Secret Santa. And so people went on and they could pick like inexpensive Amazon things and put in their basket. And then their Secret Santa would go purchase and send them to them. So a few little staff morale things, but I think probably what the staff values most is just being able to have input. So we've had so many transitions. And so I pull them together and I say, okay, what do we think? If this is our challenge, how are we going to overcome this? What problems do you see? How can we work together on this? So it's just collaboration. It's listening for understanding. We have a real we're all in this together attitude, and I think that's why we've been successful through all of this transition. We had IAT meetings today, and I just see such growth in our teachers too, and that just flexibility in their thinking, extending deadlines for kids. We had to really look at what are the power standards in your course that students have to know before they leave your course, because some courses are very standalone. It's not like 7th grade science goes into 8th grade science. We have biology going on to chemistry, going on to environmental science. So this may be the only time this student gets your content. So we really did a deep dive on what are those power standards that kid has to have before they leave your class. And also just letting teachers know you can't teach everything. You can't teach everything that you normally teach. So we got to be very strategic. And I think teachers appreciated hearing, take a deep breath, let's get our focus, and you can't be responsible for teaching everything that you would normally teach. We need to focus on what needs to be taught and just do it really, really well and hope that we get back 100%. But I think the collaboration, listening to teachers and kind of giving them the permission that they can't possibly teach all that they would normally teach, it just can't be done. And we would really just stress out the kids in the process too. So I think that's been really good for our culture.
Good. The second thing, I know the board really enjoyed, what group was it that always spoke to the board? Was it the student council? Is that something we can start up in February? I know it was part of our work session in January of 2020. A year ago, and then this, or maybe even before that. But it was before that. It was during the strategic. Have they still been meeting to where we could fire that back up in February, or is that too soon? Or the board enjoys their presentations. I think, not that we don't like hearing from Mr. Baird and everyone else, but anytime we can hear from our students, we really enjoy that. So, when can we start hearing?
I think February is not too soon. They started back up in October because they were able to do the homecoming reverse parade and homecoming ceremony that we did. That was our student council. So they are back up and running, and they can certainly do that.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mrs. Chapman?
Yes, I do have one more. I'm sorry. So what is our school doing to create fun, whether it's virtual, whether it's in the school? What are we doing to make it fun? When I was in school, we had dances, or we had outside things, we had inside things. So what are we doing right now to have fun?
Fun right now is a challenge because we can't be together. I would love more than anything to hand them all a basketball at lunchtime and let them shoot hoops, because some of them love that more than anything in the entire day. And I can't, and that's very frustrating to just have to separate them all the time. So we've done some spirit weeks. We did a spirit week before the holidays. Students participated in that. Looking forward to spring as hopefully COVID cases get better. I know students still want to do He-Man volleyball and powder puff football. I know we still want to have prom. We want to have graduation. We want to have those things. So I've begun to talk to Mr. Baird and saying, we would really like to have these things, or the spirit of these things, if they can't be exactly what they were in the past. And we're starting to have those conversations with the health department too, to put it on their radar that here are the things that we would like to do. I meet with the senior parents, any senior parent who wants to join. We have a Google Meet once a month. So I've been talking to the senior parents too, because I had my own senior son graduated last year in 2020. I know what that feels like to worry about what your senior year is going to look like, and are we going to have graduation, and what it's, and we felt the loss of that with our son. So I made a point to meet with the senior parents every month. And one of the things the senior parents really want is to do the banners in town again of the seniors. And so I meet with them, I think next week, a committee who wants to work on fundraising money to get the banners. And the mayor's already said, absolutely, you can hang them and I'll help you. So we're really focused on, not just for seniors, but for all of them, how can we get some of those things that we love back this spring and be able to do some of the things that we haven't been able to do? COVID has tied our hands. I mean, we have been limited in like the typical fun things we would do. It's been a challenge. And two, just not having students here. So we want to have some momentum and do something fun, but we have X number of kids in quarantine. We have the Digital Academy students who are out of our building. It's just hard to feel that togetherness when you only have half your students at a time in hybrid, and then you have kids in digital, and then you have kids in quarantine. And some days it's like, where's Waldo? Who's here? Who's home? Who's in quarantine? Who moved to the Digital Academy? It has been a challenge. And I think instead of doing group things, we've just done such personalized individual things, because it's just hard to get a group and have consistency, if that makes sense. But I agree, we need fun. We need fun badly. And sometimes I'll say teachers have thrown out the lesson for like the last 20 minutes of class and they just played silly games. And I love it. I love that they're doing that.
So I'm going to take just a moment real fast and hopefully play this video that Mrs. Hoffman has put together. We are at the high school. We're piloting an advanced quantitative reasoning course. This is directed for students who don't necessarily want to go to this super high level math. And so she put this together. We're hoping everything works well because she has created a video so we don't have to tune somebody else in. So I'm going to attempt to do the sound if everybody else is off, and hope I don't do there. If the sound doesn't work, I don't know why.
Hi, I'm Jody Hoffman, instructional co-chair at North Union, and I just wanted to update you on the good things that are happening at the high school and the math department. We are piloting a program called Advanced Quantitative Reasoning with our seniors this year, and it was first applied for, and the reason that we decided to do this pilot, it fit right under our vision for North Union under student programs. The idea of data connection and real life learning, it all fits together and to help prepare our students for future success. The job landscape is changing. As you can see, there are a lot of emphasis on data and computers and data analysis. And that's what this class is real life examples putting kids in the midst. So they might do an M&M lesson over cancer cells and how they multiply, a catapult project, a Barbie Bunny project, a decorative room project. So a lot of real life applications where a lot of math is intertwined and not just based on one skill at a time. They have to apply many skills and along with technology with this skill. So we applied for this program in November of last year, and we were selected to do this pilot. All the materials for the pilot are provided by ODE. So typically, the problem was there was only one pathway in high school math, and this is the pathway you see. But yet, a lot of the different job markets require different types of math. So pretty much it's the third year course and the fourth year course that are the kiddos that we are targeting with this quantitative reading course. So currently we have freshmen and sophomores taking the geometry, and course 3 now we're going to add this course quantitative reasoning. That is the hope because it's been such a success. We have our college stat, and then we have our algebra 2, and then we have our honors algebra 2, along with some people who get to access that pre-calculus if they take algebra 1 in their 8th grade year. So from here, after course 3, we have all these different offerings. And then they might take a quantitative reasoning course their junior and then decide, hey, my 4th year, I'm going to do a college stats class or a college algebra class. Or I might go to algebra 2 then at that point. Or maybe I'll do the algebra 2 first, and then I'll go on to take the modeling and reasoning quantitative analysis course. So we're offering lots of courses that fit the kids' pathway instead of the traditional pathway. So here's an activity that we did. It was a starburst graph, and we were fitting equations to model this situation and use those to help predict. And that's a lot of things that happen in life. So I'm going to, if you have any questions, please feel free to email me at jhoffman@NU-district, and I'm going to leave it to Jesse to tell you a little bit more. He's helping me.
Program has been awesome. In fact, I've been teaching for almost 20 years, and I would say that this material and the projects and activities and everything that we went through so far in this class, this has probably been the most enjoyable class, the most engaging class that I've been a part of. So this has been it's been great for our high school. I think it's been fantastic for our students, and it's been a blast so far from a teaching standpoint and working with Mrs. Hoffman on this. So. For example, we did an activity on slope, and it was we learned slope. Everything was through ramps, and if students remember how they applied slope to ramps and being able to meet code down the road, if you ran into a different situation that involved slope, for instance, like the pitch of a roof, if you were doing something with roofing, it's so easy to remember back to not necessarily slope, but remember back to that ramp activity and then how the math applied to that and how we were able to use the math to solve that problem. Everything is student-centered, and so teaching this it's been really fun, but it's been different for me, and I think different for Mrs. Hoffman, and that this is not the way you would teach, kind of the way you taught a traditional math class, where students come in and, I'm going to teach you, this is the skill we're learning today, and here's what you do first, second, third, and here's how you solve these problems, and here are some word problems or problem solving that goes along with that. It's kind of been reversed. It's been awesome. The students come in and we say, here's the problem, or here's the project, or here's the activity for today. Here's what you guys need to produce, or here's what you guys need to solve. And the majority of what we're doing is being done in groups. And so we say, here's what it is, go. You guys figure it out. And we are truly here as guides. We're here to, help you along throughout the process, but we're doing our best we really don't want to answer your questions. We really don't want to give you anything. We want to help guide you to whatever that final answer or that final product is, but we're not giving it to you. You guys, the groups of the students, you're figuring this out for yourself. I think that what really makes teaching fun and teaching enjoyable is when it's fun for the students. And so far, that has certainly been the case. So love this course so far, love this pilot program, and it's going to be a huge benefit for our students moving forward in the future.
It's real world application. So what you learn in class, you can apply it to something that you're going to do in the future. So for example, 2 of my senior classmates have already planned their senior trip and are able to use what we have learned in the classroom, which I think is pretty awesome.
So we just want to take a minute and share that course going on, and that's new this year, so we're checking out how it's going. So now I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Lish Brown. I'll try to change. I got it. It's me, but I can't see the, I gotta hide that.
Erica, this is Jean. Can you hear me? Okay, could you put a link up or send us a link to that? There was a lot of feedback in the first portion and I didn't get anything that Jody said. It was just a mess. So if you could do that, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay, so going on to the special education realm, before I go into anything, I have to say that I know during all of our planning that we did last year and all the stuff that we did around mental health, it has definitely paid off, and we've seen it this year. If you look at the programs that we had, such as PACS and Second Step and Driven, Big Brother Big Sisters, we had that foundation already going into COVID, so we were able to expand on them. Whereas I know districts that did not have those already in place, and they were really struggling now trying to get those in place because they're already embedded in so many other programs. So that is definitely a testament to the district, from teachers to our administration to the board. So thank you for letting us do all of that. The first thing I wanted to talk about our special education is our rating came out. And this is where I really just get to showcase how amazing our intervention specialists are in the district. That the state ranks us based on criterion that is either meets requirements, saying that we need assistance for 1 year, we need assistance for 2 years, we have needs intervention and needs substantial intervention. And this is the rating that I always like to say, that we always hear the horror stories that the state's gonna come take our money away. Well, this is where they get part of that from. That bottom part, the need substantial intervention, is where if a district falls in that point is where the state can come in and start saying, okay, if we do not see improvement here, here, and here, we are going to start holding some funds back. We got meets requirements for this school year, which is based on the past 2 school years, since we didn't get a score last year because of COVID. So we got the highest ranking possible. So it means that we don't have to do an improvement plan this year and submit it to the state, because we are doing everything to the highest level we possibly can. Erica, you move on, please. So this slide I thought was interesting. So you always wonder how we compare to the state of Ohio. So if you look at students with disabilities, the state of Ohio has a 15.4% of the education population that has a disability. At North Union, we are at 15.29. So we are actually exactly where the state is, which is actually kind of refreshing to see, because you never want to be so far above or so far below, then you wonder, what do we need to change? We are actually 100% right aligned with the state for identification of students. So I thought that was a very neat point to have out. Okay, now this is an interesting part. So part of the rating that I went over that talks about how we got meets requirements. We all know that the report card goes out and we get ranked A, B, C, D, F, and there's the ranking of, we want 80% proficiency on this test, and then our students with disabilities get held to that same standard. What this rating does is it actually takes it based on a statewide norm, and then projects what they feel that students with disabilities, how many can get proficient on the state test. So for example, on the reading test, the state said that they wanted at least 25.18% of the students to get proficient on the reading assessment. We had 40.69% get proficient on the reading assessment. So we went far above that average that the state wanted us to get. The same thing for math. The state wanted a 29.5% average or greater, and we got a 43.45%. So our intervention specialists have worked to the point where we are not even hovering around the average as to where the state would like us to be. We basically blew it out of the water. And I always try to say is that, the report card can look depressing at certain points. These are the facts that I want to look at as a special education teacher. These are what I want to look at, because this is students with disabilities being compared to other students with disabilities. And it's how do we expect them to do on a test? And we are doing miles above where we actually be projected from the state standpoint. All right, so what I wanted to go into a little bit to tie into all the buildings with their SEL and their academics is where special education hit a roadblock this summer going in with COVID was that, unfortunately, all of our regulations are federally mandated. So there was only so many things that ODE could put out to change. So certain things like our timelines that we had to do, we could not get waivers for any of them because they all were federally mandated, and Secretary DeVos nor the Congress would go into session to change a federal regulation due to the pandemic. So it's caused a lot of discourse just in the realm of special education because, okay, we're held to the same standard, but we're in this completely different environment. So how are we going to make sure we still do the same quality and the same great education that we do during COVID? So after speaking with our state support team and seeing what was going on, a lot of places were recommending just doing a plan that would outline to families what you were going to offer. I want to take it a step further. So what we did during the days that the board approved for us to have at the beginning, which I can say from the special education team were godsends. So thank you all for approving those days. What we did is we created distance learning plans. And what they were is they are plans that looked at all three of the different modes of education we could have, whether we were in person, whether we were hybrid, or whether we were online, and told the families, this is what we are going to offer your child if we are in this type of scenario. Because the worst thing for not only a student with disability, but the parent of a student with a disability is not knowing what is going to go on if all of a sudden they get the phone call from Mr. Baird that we are going hybrid starting the next day. So this is just an example of one of the in-person plans. And basically, this is the one that is the dream. This just basically says that if we're in person, we're going to follow the IEP 100%, and you don't have to worry about anything else. We are going to do everything the same exact way that we would. Okay, Erica? The next one now is going to start getting a little more individualized. And this one basically is switching to blended. So what we did here is our IEPs are typically written for if we are coming 100% in person. The reason these plans were so great is that it did not require us to have meetings when we went blended or online. Because based on current standpoint, we would have to have a meeting with every single family when we went blended to change parts of the IEP. We'd have to have a meeting again if we went online. Then we'd have to have a meeting again if we came back in person. So this plan basically outlined that already for the families. And it basically said, there's going to be the specially designed services says, that there's going to be a one-on-one check-in on Thursdays and Fridays, looking at scaffolding, and that's done virtually. So that'd be done during the Google Meets. And then it was done one time a week for 20 minutes. And then there was a small group with a maximum of 5 students with instruction looking at that goal. And so the goal, the IEP says is goal 1 and 2 is going to be looked at. So basically the family would know, yes, my child is not going to be in school all 5 days, but on those days they are not, and we are looking at online, they are still going to be getting actual education and looking at their IEP. Online now moved it to looking at Google Meets, talking about the small groups, and basically just started giving out that framework as to how many times parents could expect their child to work directly with an intervention specialist. This was either, say, the intervention specialist was going to sign on with the regular classroom and be there as a support for breakout sessions, or this could have been a one-on-one or a small group session to work on the skills as you're online. These plans are also where we started coming up with our groups that would come in on Wednesdays. The principals were phenomenal when the guidance came out about identifying our vulnerable youth. So the state basically said is that we could identify our vulnerable youth, and then we could basically do exemptions to our district plan. The most common one would be adding Wednesday to allowing kids to come in. Another one that we utilized were kids coming in 4 days a week. We had certain students that needed the consistency due to disability to come in Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. So what that is, we took basically our population and we took our most medically fragile students and they went to the top of our list. These are our students that we need to make sure we are consistent with and we are concerned and always thinking about them. We then went through and took out the students that have the most times on their IEPs, the ones that have the most services, that if we don't make sure we keep them at the front of our minds, they're going to be the ones that we're going to have to struggle the most with once we do come back to full in person. And then the last part was basically I left it up to the buildings. Is I said, you know your students better. I know them by their disability and by a meeting that I might see them if I come into the classroom. You know the students best. So basically the building teams then got to decide who are the students that they felt based on their social emotional, based on behavioral needs, based on stability at home, or what amazing, just other factors, who they thought needed a change from our district plan to something to be added. So it allowed us to really take some of the fear that our families were feeling initially, because we know that spring was a little hectic when all of a sudden we were closed. We didn't want to have that same fear in fall. So we wanted to be proactive by having these plans done so families already knew what everything was going on. Hey, Erica, you mentioned the next one. Now, this plan is basically a recovery services plan. And what this says is that we know that I've said it multiple times, we have amazing intervention specialists. And even with the best times, sometimes you cannot provide the same exact services as you would being 5 days a week in a 7.5 hour day. You just can't. So what this does is if we have a child, so basically we'll use MAP data when the semester comes out. If we look at MAP data and see where our peers are, and then we look at where the child is on their IEP. If we see a significant drop where we had a child that was progressing, let's just say half a grade level a semester, and now all of a sudden they drop down a grade level and a half, that is a child we do not want to have that same drop keep going. So basically what we're doing is being proactive to have recovery services identified so the family knows that we're going to do this. So the example on there was, for reading, we're going to basically meet until Christmas, we're going to meet an extra, half an hour a week to get some extra time in there. And basically it's just an agreement between the school and the parent just to say, I don't want this to keep going. I see there's a problem and I don't want to let it just keep going and hope for the best. We're going to try to catch some of that then. Always with special education, with extended school year, that's always an option. But these services allowed us to be able to offer a service that was never really an option for our students. We really were able to kind of say, okay, here's the IEP, which normally works for them 100%. If it wasn't for COVID, this IEP would be amazing. We wouldn't have any issues. However, since we're in COVID, we need to do something a little bit more just to make sure we have no gaps going on with education. So that is the point of the recovery services plan. Now, since we're entering the second half of the school year is when these conversations are really starting to come up, which is expected. This is what we consider to be our IEP season. This is when most of our meetings take place. They normally take place in the end of winter and spring. So that's when we're going to start having these conversations more with families about what can we do to try to make sure we are getting every opportunity possible. So those are the main steps that we have taken to ensure that our students are getting an academic and as close as to their norm as possible. Erica, I believe that was my last part. I don't think I have anything next. And so basically I'll just open up if you guys have any questions for me.
Tom, I do have a question. Okay, so are these the students that we're bringing in on Wednesday also?
Yes, ma'am. Yep.
Yep. Any other questions for Mr. Brown? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I just want to, oh, good. And it always seems to be there. Sorry. I just want to say, first of all, thank you for allowing us to share this information. I think so many times we're so busy with everything that we're doing, we forget to stop and take a breath and share what we're doing. And that there's so much pride in what we're doing, and you could hear it in the team when I go back to the fact that this is an administrative team, but it's also a team as an entire district and community. So we want to thank you for this time, and it's been a long time. Mr. Beard said, can you make it about 3 to 5 minutes? And clearly a person, I think he meant 3 to 5 minutes per slide or something. So, but this is valuable work we're doing, and we do appreciate you taking the time to listen. I oftentimes think we should promote what we're doing a little bit more because we're doing so much, as you can tell. So I'm going to take in the tail end. They really focused a lot on the SEL. You know, when we look at our students and taking care of the whole child, we have that SEL piece and we have that academic piece. And we never want them to combat with each other. We want them to work in this balance. But you can tell from our staff, and when you talk about culture, when it comes down to it, we're going to put that SEL just a little bit higher on the list for those academics, because otherwise it's going to cause all this stress. So we have to keep some rigor going. We have to keep the education going, but we have to take care of our kids. So I'm so proud of the work that the buildings are doing. If you remember last year, our Battelle SOAR design team was doing a lot of this work. They're still there doing it. We just took off the Battelle and continued as the design team. And that's how SEL has become our focus, because that's what we heard from our staff and our students, that this is a need. So that's what you see going on. And when you talk about how are we helping our staff, our last work day, you remember we did a lot of SEL work with our teachers and our staff members, and we partnered with a lot of great places. Richwood Coffee donated coffee so we could have Ohio Guidestone come in and do a coffee talk. We had Mr. Baird and Memorial Health doing Tai Chi. We had Sarah Scott coming in and doing yoga with our teachers, and then we also did some therapeutic painting and just took time to just breathe and enjoy time with each other. This workday, we're focusing back in on what do we need to do to support the students. So on the January 15th date, our teams are meeting and planning and saying, okay, what do we need to cover to boost us through the rest of the year? January and February are often hard times. And for everybody, and it's no less there. So I just want to give a shout out to the buildings and the teams, and I know you keep saying that, we all keep saying that, but it's true. So I think we just don't want to take a moment away from the work they're doing. They've also been doing a lot of work on the curriculum and instruction. We're fortunate to have instructional leaders in our buildings. They take the time to learn what they need to learn, and they drive that piece. And we're also fortunate to have an instructional team that has really come together to make great strides with what our kids are doing. So I'm going to share with you some data from here. And we're going to look at ACT data first. This is going to be very trend. So we're going to do this bird's eye view, and I'm going to try to do it quickly because I know that we've been sitting a while, so we'll try to go through there. So if you can look real quickly at our trend, there was a time when we didn't have to test every student. We only tested certain students, and it was pretty much optional. We now test every student as a junior. And so you can see some of the trends there at the top part of it. And I did put that in the packet, and the copy machine was not, it did not make it any clearer than what's there. So I apologize for that. But you can see the top part really looks at the percent of our students who met the benchmarks as set by the state, and then the bottom section of it looks at our average ACT scores and compares our district to the state. So you can see that we have some growth over time as we look through there, and then we're also pretty comparable with the state. Now, are we going to be content with just being right where the state is? No, of course we want to push ahead of that, and that's what we're working on, and we're going to go over some things that we're already doing and we're going to continue to do with that. So you can see in English, the state average is 18, we're about 17. The English, if you've looked at the ACT, is a lot of grammar, and it's a lot of looking at the mechanics part. So that's something that we know that we need to pick back up. Our staff chose to do no red ink. They feel like that it supports that piece on there. So we're utilizing that to help support that. I'm really proud of this score right here with our mathematics. When you look at that, the state average is 19.3, and ours this last year that we just had was 19.7. So to be above the state average in math is really good. It's a tough portion. I always talk about my students, my own children being identified in math, gifted, and yet they struggle on the ACT. So it's nice to see that our students are outscoring the state average. When we look at the reading, we're right on the cusp of being exactly where the state average is too. And that's, again, different from the English. The mechanics are the English portion. The reading is looking at the passages and asking some questions there. So we're looking good there. Our science, again, is almost directly with the state. And then our overall composite score, you can see, is just fractionally away from that. So we feel pretty good with that. We're not satisfied, of course. We want to continue to grow. And so I have on the next slide some of the things that we're doing. And Mrs. Chapman, if I can have, I'm going to silence my microphone because she's going to talk a little bit about this.
Okay, so I just want to give you an overview of in the past. So I'm going into my 5th year at North Union, what we've been working toward in those 4 full school years that we've had. When I first came to North Union, we were still in the graduation requirements that students had to take 7 end-of-course exams, or it's 7 subjects where they had an end-of-course exam required by the state, and they had to earn 18 testing points across 7 end-of-course exams to be able to graduate. And so at that time period, around 2016, 2017, 2018, we were very focused on these graduation requirements and getting students to pass the state test. So we really looked at our professional development, or are we teaching the standards? Because the tests are based on our learning standards. So we did a big project, and every content teacher looked at what are my standards and how does that align to this test to make sure that we could get kids 18 testing points. We became very good at that. The past 2 graduating classes that were under this graduation requirement, because graduation requirements have now changed a little bit, we were getting it to where we had very few students who were having to do retests in their junior and senior year. They were passing these tests, and these tests were no longer a barrier to graduation. And that was an incredible accomplishment. And so by working on some of these professional development activities, looking at our power standards, looking at how we're designing our lesson plans, going deeper with our questioning with students so that we're not just sitting on the surface of knowledge, but we're trying to get students to apply what they're learning and dig a little deeper, that helped kids perform better on these state assessments. And then I pulled a team of teachers together, an ACT data team 2 years ago, and we started to look at bringing the pre-ACT in and giving that assessment to our freshmen, because our juniors were taking the ACT, and we wanted to compare the data from when you were a freshman to how you grew by the time you were a junior. We brought in last year, before COVID hit, an expert from ACT to work with this ACT data team to look at the ACT products that would give us the biggest bang for our buck. And I think we wanted to do it this year, but COVID derailed that, and ACT wouldn't call Erica or me back to sell us a product. It's called the ACT Aspire, and it is a 5-subject test given to freshmen. It drills down into 5 core subject areas, and it aligns directly to the ACT. So this team of teachers who are working with me on this, and Mrs. Hoffman, Dr. Bauer, what we're looking to do is to give students the Aspire, which is an ACT product in the freshman year, and it will show growth over time, and we compare it to their scores on the ACT when they're a junior. The ACT Aspire will also predict a students score on the ACT. So it has this alignment where it will predict their ACT score as a junior, and it will make recommendations. It gives us lots of data that we need to work with students on, but it will also give the student information about which courses they should take as well. So what we're trying to do is to create some data where we can monitor growth over time. With those state end of course tests that kids had to take and get those 18 testing points, they really did not show you growth over time because you were really just looking at how do you perform in geometry. We only take that one time in high school. You know, how do you perform in physical science? You really only take that one time in high school, and they didn't show you growth over time. So this team of teachers is really invested in using the ACT products. We'll start that next fall with our freshmen, and we'll have this growth data that the high school really hasn't had before. So we're excited to start that. The pre-ACT data doesn't drill as deep as the Aspire. That's why we're trying to move to the Aspire and not use the pre-ACT anymore. Also, if you know ACT, they changed their products around a little bit. So we really think Aspire is going to give us the biggest bang for our buck. Some other things we did was when I came to North Union, we were using this a little bit, but we're using it more so where our English and math teachers are using sample ACT questions in their classroom. You'll see Mr. Miller doing that, Mrs. Hunley's doing that. So students are doing ACT prep through ACT practice questions as a regular part of their English and math classes. Also, starting in 2017, we take all the juniors and we give them a 1-hour ACT prep course. So we bring in Dan Morrison, and he works with every junior. We bring them into 2 different groups, and he walks them through how to prepare for the ACT, how to time yourself on the ACT, how much time you should take per question, different tips and tricks, and he gives them a resource as well. And then we offer, if students want it, and there's a small charge for it, is a 3-hour ACT boot camp. Any student can take it, and we will not allow finances to be a barrier for any student to take it if they want to. We charge about $20 for this 3-hour course taught by Mr. Dan Morrison. And students really, they do a practice test, and he walks them through tips for every single portion of the ACT. So we have about 12 to 20 students a year who take advantage of that boot camp that we offer here right in our school and in our library if they want that really intensive boot camp. We also noticed that not all students had a graphing calculator. And so our first year that we tested juniors, we had juniors going into test who hadn't worked with a graphing calculator. Or they just used it in the classroom, but they didn't have one to like do their homework at home and use at home. Well, a graphing calculator is really a benefit to being the speed of which you can go through the ACT and complete the math portion of the ACT. So our math department has been teaching students how to use the graphing calculator efficiently, and then they have that available to them at home when they're doing their homework, but also when they were taking the ACT. But I found it a huge disadvantage to our students to approach the ACT without having access to a graphing calculator. So we made sure that we have enough that our students in our advanced math are taught how to use it, number one, in class. It's a regular tool that they use. But number two, that they have that available to them when they test. So anyway, that's been kind of the progression, that focus first on just getting kids passing the end of course exams and aligning our curriculum so we're teaching the standards so kids could graduate. And then we said, okay, we're good at that, but we want all of our students to have college-ready scores on the ACT. So universities set a score they want in math, English, and reading for kids to be considered college-ready. And what that means is if a student has college-ready scores on the ACT, they can start with credit-bearing courses right off the bat when they hit college instead of having to start with remedial coursework. And the research behind students starting with remedial coursework is really grim. That if students start with remedial classes, they are so far less likely to finish a 2 or 4 year degree. So my personal goal is that I want to see as many students as possible and see growth over time of more and more of our students hitting those 18s and 22s to have those college-ready scores. And we have lots of kids sitting on that bubble. We just need that push over the top. And so we're working on our instruction. Erica has us working on looking at short cycle assessment and using data just in the classroom more effectively. I think if we use the Aspire and drill deep and really understand how to use data to help kids in the freshman, sophomore year, that will improve those scores on the ACT. And that's why that Aspire was developed. So we have the team assembled, got a little derailed by COVID this year, but we're ready to launch the Aspire next year. I just couldn't, ACT was so slammed with changes that we couldn't even buy the product from them this year, but we'll be ready in the fall. Any questions about the high school initiatives with the ACT? And
Mrs. Chapman, I have questions about the ACT boot camp. What's been the feedback from the students who have been through it? And is it only offered one time throughout the year, or is it something they have a couple of different opportunities to take?
We've offered it once a year, and we offer it before like a month before the students take the ACT. So we try to like front load them and get that information current before they take it. And you can take it as a junior or a senior. We have some sophomores who take the ACT at a national test site. They could participate in it. And typically when students go through a boot camp like that, they can improve their score by 1 or 2 points. Because there are definitely tips and tricks to taking the ACT and knowing how to time yourself on the math test. Mr. Miller teaches this in his Algebra 2 class. He teaches students timing, how to kind of time themselves. So there are definitely things that if you do a boot camp like this, it will help you improve your score. And students have been very positive about it.
Thank you.
I do have a question. So, I mean, I realize that this is all of our students in the junior year. Mm-hmm. So what do our ACT scores look like for the kids who are actually college bound?
I know that Mr. Baird shared that data with you. I mean, I would hope that the majority of our students are, again, my goal would be that the majority of our students are at that 18, 20, 22 mark to be college ready. But we have, and Mr. Baird can speak to the percentage, but we have many students who are in the 25 and 30s. I think we had our highest percentage of kids with 25s and above in the past number of years. I thought he was going to say.
Mrs. Chapman, I mean, I can honestly tell you, my son does recruits students for football. And one of the first things they look at, sure, they want the best catcher, the fastest runner, the best tackler. But the first thing they really look at is ACT scores, because these institutions will not accept them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the data that we shared that we've looked at over the last few years, the trend data. One thing, all the kids are taking the test now, so that has some impact. But it used to be 10 kids would score 25 or over per class. Okay, so that's 8 to 10%. Now 20 kids are consistently scoring 25 or above on the ACT over the last 4 or 5 years, which is a good thing. Now, having all the kids take it maybe contributes 1 or 2 additional ones, but having 20 with 25 or above is strong. Where the concern is that group in the 15 to 20 range. And some students take advantage of taking it multiple times, some don't. Some, their ability, their prediction isn't as strong as others based on how they sit down and take a test. And that's why those test prep strategies are effective as well. Okay.
I'd like to make a comment. I know from having taught juniors, I found that kids don't want to read difficult material. They are reluctant to read difficult material because it's difficult. And by not having read difficult material, they are not exposed to difficult vocabulary, and they run into problems in the reading portion of the test. They get into doing analogies, and if they don't know definitions of words, then they can't solve the analogies, which is a part of the verbal portion. I'm just throwing that out because that's something that kids need to be doing from about the 6th or 7th grade on, is having a body of literature that they've read that is difficult, challenging. And, you know, sometimes it's kind of difficult your junior year to all of a sudden get serious about it and prep to take the test. So that was simply something that I found over the years, and I don't know the answer to that.
Well, and
go ahead, Janelle, sorry.
I was going to say, I think when the end of course assessments came along, they did push the level of reading and the complexity of text and even informational text that students would be responsible for reading and preparing for and being tested over. And then Erica and I are going to be working with the staff on disciplinary literacy, where we are helping students read across the curriculum. And that's a book that she brought in. But we were talking about, you know, when you hit high school, you get words like mitochondria and federalism and, you know, all these very technical words that are specific to that content area. And if a student may know the concept, they may know what the word means, but they may not know the word or be able to read it or know the root words and you know, that. So there are specific strategies that we would like to work with the high school staff on creating these anchor charts on your wall where you give the word and you give a visual representation and examples, just to have that for every student to kind of just help with that. Just the amount of vocabulary that you get in high school is astronomical, and helping students with just what you're saying, reading difficult text and having those definitions, and that will help on the ACT as well.
Absolutely.
In addition to that, Jean, you bring up a good point. It's not just 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th. We talk with Dar and we talk with Matt and we talk with our elementary teachers. We start preparing for good scores the ACT as soon as the kids arrive at school. You know, that foundational literacy is so important, and everything we do is gearing toward that. And ACT is a long established, unbiased, they believe it's unbiased, and it is the most unbiased test that we can give high school students that put them on a level playing field across the country.
I do have one more question I want to make. Is there any way that we can get information, like at our work session that we're going to have, that reviews with us as far as school board members, that over the last couple of years, the students that have gone on to college, like how they tested, and the kids that you have projected coming through? Does that make sense what I'm asking? To see if we are increasing, improving?
We could definitely pull the data of the past few graduating classes, like the ones who would have taken that junior ACT, and be able to show that, you know, college acceptance rates. That's something that we could show. Now, that doesn't mean the student didn't take the ACT though multiple times. So a lot of students will take it 3 times. So maybe their junior year when they took it at school wasn't their highest score, but then they took it a time or 2 again and they improved. But we could certainly show you students who went to college and the scores that they had.
Ms. Chapman, can you speak very quickly to how the booster class is marketed?
There we go. And I would even add to that, there's such a monetary value to our kids as they take these ACT scores, but there seems the complaint that I get from parents having a senior is that our GPAs, these kids that are getting recruited for basketball or whatever football team, the GPAs that they're showing these colleges, and they're showing them their ACT score, they're not adding up. I mean, if I got kids that that I'm talking to that they're showing me a 3.4 GPA and they're showing me a 14 or 15 ACT. That should not happen. So somewhere, either we're losing them along the way in the curriculum, or we're just pushing them through to get their GPA up, or we're missing out completely on helping them prepare for the ACT. So there's got to be somewhere we're missing, and this isn't just this year. We've talked about it the last 3 years, and you've talked about it with some people, Matt, as well. This isn't something that we're just starting to hit on today. This is consistently a problem. So, and I'd also like to see, we're looking at state data, comparing our district to the state. I'd like to see districts our size. So I'd like to see a Pleasant, an Elgin, a Ben Logan, schools like us, maybe schools even in our league. We've seen data up on the board of schools in our league or schools like us. How do we compare to our schools our size? Right? Because we're the demographics, the kids in those demographics are the same. When you talk about the state, you could be talking about Columbus City schools all the way down to, I don't know, private schools if they're in that data, but I would assume they are. But when we talk about state, that's 650 schools or whatever it is. So can we see 10 or 20 schools like us, and how do we compare to those schools? That would give us a real feel for how we're doing on the ACT prep and scores. So that's just
Brian, I'd like to make a comment. And this is only from the area of English. Math, no clue as far as I'm concerned, or science. But let's say I've got, I'm still in the classroom and I've got juniors and they're writing essays and I have them do a rough draft and I go over it with them and I talk to them about it, and here's where you have some problems and you need to work on structuring it better and work on your sentence structure. So by the time that student turns the essay in, if they've done what I've asked them to do, they're probably going to get a pretty good grade. So there might be 2 or 3 essays in 9 weeks, and factor in some quizzes, maybe a test in the 9 weeks. And a lot of kids study for a test and do a good job kind of in the short term. And so maybe that student gets a B in English for the semester. But I don't think that guarantees he's going to get a 20 or a 22 in that section, that verbal section, because you're measuring a lot more. I guess what I'm saying is kids are graded on so many more things within the classroom, projects, assignments, for me, essays, PowerPoint demonstrations. So I don't think you can always correlate ACT and GPA, if that makes sense. And I'm going to shut off my microphone.
This is Shelley again. I would just like us to see maybe during our work session, look at this and kind of maybe help you guys also. I mean, I think with my son had gone through college. Most of us in this room have gone through college. Maybe we could help you with some ideas of how to even help some of these students, that we can just kind of brainstorm some thoughts and some ideas also, like Jean just did. This is just a suggestion, but it's an area that I'm really, really concerned about, because I see that maybe we are not giving our students what they actually need to continue on to that next level, and that maybe some of our kids aren't getting that opportunity. And I would like to see our kids have the same opportunity that my son has had and Cheryl's son has had. And that's just an area that I'm concerned about.
And I just want to say too, I think
I just want to say,
we were looking at
points, very good points. You're seeing the complexity of all of this. And Jean, I appreciate you talking about that. It's very complex, and it does factor into what courses they're taking, and there are more grades into it. So it is very complex. So we appreciate the thought process with that and the brainstorming. We will gather now, Brian, I'm not sure that they're publicized for other local districts, that would have to be something that we could maybe work with on an honor sharing, with some people that we know, and asking, hey, we'll share ours if you share yours type thing. So I can certainly reach out to some of the local districts and see if they're willing to do that. That would be that trend average thing. So we can look into that as well. I'm sorry, Cheryl, did you?
I was just going to say, my youngest daughter, when she graduated in 2004, she was co-valedictorian. She'd taken the ACT test 3 times and got the same score.
Mm-hmm.
And so she finally decided there's no sense in putting the money out to take it again, because she obviously was stuck on 25. Do many of the other kids get to a point, feel like they're stalemated, and why can't I get farther?
Well, and there's something to say for taking it multiple times. As a family, we chose to have our kids start taking 8th grade. They came out and was like, that was a waste of money, but it gave them the experience of that. So some of our students are only taking it 1 time, and that's averaged in there. So there are a lot of little nuances in there. There's something about taking it more often. Than by the time that my kids were sophomore or junior, they've had the different math levels or the different sciences. So their scores did impact in some areas. Now, ACT is also doing a new piece, and they were supposed to launch it this year. And I was just talking to another person that helps give the test, and she said OSUM is not set up for this yet. They're computers, but they can take just one portion of the test. They could retake it. So right now, every time a kid takes it, they have to go and take the whole battery of tests. So they're going to now let people pick and choose. So maybe they're just going to go take the math. Think about how much better our students can perform when they only have to focus on one portion of the test and they can retake test. That will then give a super score. Now remember, that's going to help the students who are taking it multiple times though. So there are some students who are not going to take it multiple times. They go into our average. They're not choosing to go on to college. They're just taking it because they're compliant, and that's what we have to do. So, there's some of those pieces in there. So we kind of do need to look at some disaggregating some of that data, as you said, looking at the students that are going on. So, yeah, good. I'm going to talk briefly about the NWEA. So this is what we use in K-8. It's pretty much a piece between a universal screener, but it does have some diagnostic pieces in it. So we're going to talk about that. NWEA did a study because of COVID, and they had 4.4 million students in grades 3 to 8 across the nation who had taken the test. And these are their general findings. And I wanted to start with these general findings from them because you're going to see that we are very much in line with what they're showing. And we did participate in this study, by the way. They said, can we use your data? I said, well, of course, this is going to help us. So what the simple part of this, and you can read it in more details, is that they're finding that students in reading, they performed about the same, but there was a bigger loss in math, 5 to 10 points loss in math. So if you think of this from a standard side, we have our ELA standards, our K2, and then we have 3-5, and then we have 6-8, and then we have 9-10 together and 11-12. So they're kind of banded together. And when you look at those standards, the verb changes. So it's pretty much the same standard, but we're going a little bit deeper with it in ELA. So it wouldn't be alarming to see that our kids are surprising to see that our kids did pretty well in ELA. Math is a little bit different. It kind of spirals through there across the standards. And so there are certain things that are a bigger focus in one grade level versus the next grade level. So we may have a high focus on division and multiplication, or multiplication in 4th grade and division in 5th grade, or a higher focus on fractions versus percentages. So you can see that when we don't have that piece, it's a little bit more difficult. And then, as Mrs. Hoffman said today, it's difficult to teach math in a digital environment because we need to see their work. And if we can't see their work and we only see the answers wrong, we don't know where they fell apart. So math is very hands-on in a way. My husband always says he teaches math, and he said, if I can't see where they're missing the problem, a Google form doesn't do me a whole lot because I know they got the wrong answer, but I don't know why. So that's kind of leads us into the NWEA data too. Like, it gives us a snapshot and it gives us some idea of what's going on, but we got to say, why is this going on and what are we going to do next? So I just put a quick snapshot in there of where we ended. So winter of 2019 to 20 to fall of 2021. So this is a report that NWA prepared for us. It's the COVID-19 loss report. And you can see that on average, we had about 3 points average in third grade. And then we had some gains in 7th and 8th grade in reading. Now, if I can indulge you about the NWA a little bit, in K2, there's a lot of growth that you'll see in NWA. Our students are expected to grow about 16 to 18 points. I mean, it varies. When you get into the 3-5 band and then the 6-8 band, it may only be about 5 or 6 points in a year. And then in 6-8, it may be just 1 or 2 points. So we expect a larger growth piece in the younger grades. So if we're expecting them to grow more in a year, we might see them lose more points in a year per se. And then you can also see the math that we saw this downfall in there. But what I started taking a little bit, there's always the discussion about the summer slide. And so I was looking up, instead of just going from my memory, what does NWEA say about the natural summer slide? We know that when our kids are off for 3 months, we lose some pieces. And as much as my husband likes to think that they sit around and do math problems, none of my kids, even with a math teacher as a father, have sat there and been doing math problems for fun, although some of them will sit down and read for fun. So you can see that there's a bit of a loss. So I found on here, and I just wanted to take a moment to share this with you, and it's difficult to see here, but the words are more important than the pictures. We can take a look at that. But the natural summer learning loss for grades 3 to 8, students show a drop of between 3 and 5 RIP points. Relative to gains. So they might grow 4 to 16 during the school year, but they on average lose 3 to 5 over the summer. So now if we take a quick look back up there, remember on average, we're losing 3 to 5 anyway. It doesn't look so bad at all, right? I mean, we were doing some great things from March on. We knew we were making some great gains. We're also excited, though, to see as we finish up this next round of MAP testing, what we can see then is, since we've had them at the beginning of the year from September to now, what growth have we made, and then what do we need to do to launch them through the end of the year? Now, you may be saying, Erica, you said this was a K-8 test, and you have given us a 3-8 data. And the reason that I did that is I sat in on a webinar, and this was my specific question. I said, how did COVID impact primary students based on NWEA data? And their response was, we're doing some additional research on this topic, but given the data and our concerns about reliability of our assessment data of younger students, we haven't shared any conclusions at this time. I can tell you it's in the double digits in our 1st and 2nd grade. Is that alarming? Not really, because our K1, 2 students are sponges. They are learning every moment of every day from everything, whether it's a specific lesson or just being there. So that's kind of tells us the loss, but it also tells us the gain, because they're back. And guess what they are? Sponges. And they're learning so much from everything we do. So that's where that excitement of coming back and seeing here, as we get our testing done in the next couple weeks, we can pull this report and actually have this for you, not at the length that you'll hear now, but I can just share that data with you. And I think we'll see some good things from that. So that's the NWEA. I also want to share quickly RIMS and 3rd grade OST data. Again, you're going to see this piece here. This looks at, remember our RIMS are reading and improvement monitoring plans. Those are any students in K3 who do not meet the cut scores, or we just have concerns about. We're putting them and saying, okay, we're going to focus on these kids a little bit more carefully and more personalized. So we're creating these plans for them. So you can see our kindergarten in 1920, we had 49 off track. And this year we have 61 that were marked off track based on the KRA. Again, is this alarming? We know preschool is huge for our students. It helps our kids. And when we are remote, it's very difficult to do preschool. So we think that accounts for that. First grade, you can see that we had 5 that didn't meet the cut score before. This year we had 25. That's our biggest differential piece there. And then you can see in second grade and third grade, it's pretty similar, 40 last year, 39, and then 25 and 22. Our overall percentages, because remember, we RIMP kids that we just have concerns about because they're not at the norm, and those numbers look pretty similar. I'm going to keep moving there. Our third grade OST data, we just got this in. If you can read across there and see it, if my picture came out all right. We had 40% of our students were proficient or above when we just got this data back. Little bit lower, right? Last year we had 50%, the year before 47, the year before 40. But remember, they kind of kick this number up a little bit to hit these scores. So they're making it a little bit more difficult. We do have a bit of a concern. I would be remiss if I don't point this out, that we do have here 43% of our students scored limited. So that's a bit of a concern, but we're not just looking at this as a data point, we're looking at our MAP scores. So it's not just one piece. So I wanted to pull that with you together. At the bottom there, you can see in fall of 2019, 85 out of 117 of our students had hit a promotion score. And that means they either had a 194 on the NWEA, an OST scaled score of 683. Remember, they have to be 700 to be proficient, but we will promote them if they're at a 683, and a subscore in the reading portion of 46. So we had 72.6%. This year, we're at 59.6%. So a little bit lower. I'm not the most mathematical, but 13% roughly, so it's a little bit lower than we would like to see. But notice the scaled score went up just by a point, but everything else is the same. So I'm going to then try to go down here. Oops, I went too far. So what are we doing about all of this? So data is great. It gives us a snapshot, but what do we do? So we've spent a lot of time at the end of last year, March, and this year, really building that foundational knowledge. We heard from teachers, students, parents, everybody in the family saying we need some consistency. I know it was already touched upon. We went with one LMS, Google Meet, or with the Google products, Google Classroom. We want to get everybody on the same page. So the second packet that you have there, I just wanted to share with you the differentiation that we did for our beginning of the year PD. As we said, we're thankful for that time that you provided for us to do that. I wanted to give you an example of each grade level band. So we had pre-K 2, 3, 5, 6, 8, and then 9, 12. And then you'll also see differentiation based on content area as well. So you can take a look at that. What are we doing next? So, we figured we've been spending a lot of time on instruction. The past, my first year PD was kind of already set, and we just went with what was there. Last year, we tried to make it a little bit more focused in terms of 3. So we wanted to learn about something, practice it, and then reflect on it. This year, we front-loaded a whole bunch of professional development. We allowed people to breathe and get support from the coaches and the instructional team, and provided what they needed. As we heard that we're getting ready to launch an assessment PD. And when I say assessment, it's going to be a lot of choice. So you have a copy of this. It's a combination of OTES 2.0, which focuses on not what your results of the assessment is, but what do you do with those results. So no longer will OTES say, well, 50% of your evaluation comes from your scores. We don't, it's not necessarily what your scores are. What are you doing because your scores are this? How is it informing your instruction? So we wanted to start taking pieces of that. This is combined with the teaching and learning cycle that our resident educators use. It's a 3-step process. We could use the 5-step OIP process. It doesn't matter, but we're starting to look at the assessments, allowing teachers to say, okay, which 2 pieces of assessment do I want to look at? You're going to choose them, set some goals, and then reflect upon how we're using that assessment. So that's coming up. And then we have our literacy plan. And as Janelle talked about that, the disciplinary literacy, that brings in our vocabulary piece that we're working on. We heard loud and clear from our NWEA data that we need to look at some sort of numeracy plan too. I don't want to say a math plan, I want to say numeracy, because numeracy is in other areas besides just math. Literacy is in other areas besides just ELA. So we have to kind of break down those walls and know that we're working on this all together. So we are in the very, very beginning stages of looking at the numeracy plan. It will be modeled after the literacy plan, pulling the data, but we're going to say, okay, what are some foundational components that we need vertically for those numeracy supports. We also have planned some data work sessions so we can dig into this data that's going to be coming hot off the press. And of course, our instructional team has been doing a fantastic job of supporting any need, listening to the feedback. How can we become more efficient with what we're doing, and what are our next steps? So that is all I have. Any questions, I guess, for me?
All right, thank you everyone for your presentations this evening. A lot of information, but a lot of good information. I know you worked hard on all of that, and we look forward to, I guess, the progress that we're going to see moving forward. So, kind of gives the board a good footprint of where we sit, Mr. Baird, I think, and gave you some good information there, and kind of a roadmap where we want to move forward with our district academically. So we thank you everyone for that information. All right, let's move on. Item C, financial report. Mr. Muniak.
Just have a couple things to report. First of all, there's an updated 5-year forecast in your financial packet. In December, we received roughly $180,000 Bureau of Workers' Compensation dividend, which about $175,000 of that went into the general fund. We also put a small portion into the food service fund. Understand that's a one-time payment. So, right now we've had a lot of one-time payments. We've had a lot of refunds from Bureau of Workers' Compensation. Now, this one was received different than those prior ones because it was considered a dividend as opposed to a rebate or a refund. I have, of course, put that on in the 5-year forecast, and then I back it on out in future years. Also, there has been talk about additional federal funding. We have not seen any numbers as of yet. We are hearing that we could be looking at 4 times what all we initially got in COVID funds, which would be approximately $480,000. We will have to have serious discussions as far as what all we plan to utilize that money for. Just in kicking around ideas at lunch today, something as maybe some kind of expanded summer school or something like that we would be able to use those funds to really try to broaden that, especially with, as we know, and has been discussed, a lot get lost whenever we're in hybrid or distance learning. So, maybe the summer then can be utilized to maybe stop those 5 to 10 point drops in, map testing and, or more preparation for ACT. I think we really need to try to think outside the box of what we can use those funds for. Like I said, that's just what I've heard through some various chats and those type of things. I have not seen official numbers yet. But obviously, whatever numbers come about, we will utilize them to the best ability for our students. That's all I have at this time, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Marniak. Any questions for Mr. Marniak? I just had a quick question. The CARES, is the COVID money you're referring to, the $480,000 we might get, is that the same thing as the CARES Act money that we received?
No, the CARES Act was whenever you received your first stimulus check. This is the one that was just passed, the $600 stimulus check. So there was additional money tied to that one. I don't know what we'll have to call it now, CARES 2.0, what exactly it's going to be called, or I can't remember. I think at one time it was a Heroes, but I think that went away, or I don't know. I'm sorry. So, yeah.
So how much did we get the CARES, initial CARES Act?
Well, there are different pots of money. So in what was called the CARES Act money, we got about $120,000. And then we got additional $85,000 from another grant. And then we have the broadband grant, which, provides the wireless and those type of things. Though that money came to about $24,000, I think it is. And initially, the last two that I just talked about, the additional $85,000 and then the broadband, we were going to have to expend those by December 31st of 2020. They have since expanded that so that now we have all this calendar year to also expend those money. Obviously, with the $85,000, we are well on our way of expending most, if not all of it. The one that really was going to be an issue was the broadband funds, because we paid to purchase the devices, which lowered our monthly costs going out in the future. But then we couldn't prepay for the service for those. It had to be on a monthly basis. So we were really going to only use about $11,000 of that fund. But now that we have that, we're going to, because once you activate those devices, they pretty much, I believe here, I think they have to stay active for at least 6 months. And some districts like at Mechanicsburg, once we activated them, because of how we acquired them, they have to now be active for 12 months. So this has given schools the ability to actually utilize those funds to pay for those devices.
Out of the 120, what do we have left?
That's pretty much gone.
It's gone.
Yeah. We pretty much have spent everything just because of the timelines. And, it was to be used to make sure that we were able to come back as much as possible. So we spent a lot of money on PPE equipment. We spent a lot of money on plexiglass and dividers and everything like that. Everything that we needed to try to be as safe as possible. We also did some purchases for technology to help us make sure that we had the systems in place for distance learning. We bought some Chromebooks when they were available. There was a time period whenever you could hardly get Chromebooks because everyone was trying to buy them. So we had some additional Chromebooks that we purchased because we know that we were going to have some damages and those type of things, because they were being utilized much more, being transported and those type of things. So we wanted to make sure that we had stuff on hand. So if something happened, we can hand a kid another computer and then do whatever we need to do to repair that one.
Okay, good. Well, 480,000, hopefully the ability to expand on what we would have to use that money for, I would assume they would.
Yeah, and we haven't seen any of that as far as what are the restrictions, and we also want to be good stewards of whatever money we get. We don't want to just going out to spend money. We want to make sure that we're doing it for a defined purpose that's for the betterment of our community and our students. It's all taxpayer.
It's all of our money. It's all taxpayer money. So we want to make sure we're doing spending that money wisely. Any other questions for Mr. Marniak? Thank you, sir. Mr. Staley, legislative report.
As full and lengthy as the past 2 months have been, this one is equally short. It didn't quite take up a half a page, but partly due to the Christmas break, they had a lengthy Christmas break, and I think it's only been about 2.5 weeks since we last met. Really the only thing, and Mr. Baird spoke at some length about this, was Governor DeWine's new guidelines regarding spread in the classroom. And again, he and I spoke about this some. It wouldn't necessarily have affected our quarantine, what we've had over the past few months, but going forward, as we move to 100% of the kids in the building, this could really help us out and keep us in session a lot longer. And that's really all I had. That was the big news in the last 2.5 weeks. And I'll entertain any questions anyone might have. But thank you.
The quarantine time, is it 10 days, 14 days, 7 days? What?
So what came with that, with the latest orders, that'll be updated with that. So the quarantine can be shortened to 10 days, but again, it's only when all plexiglass and masks and 6 feet, all that stuff is used. So we don't feel comfortable changing that. We would like to and trust me, I had the whole thing ready to go. And I think I even shared it with you guys. But once they came out with the new orders, I figure we need to combine it rather than put out an order and then 2 weeks later put out another order. It didn't really change what we were doing very much, as it turned out, the 14 to 10, just because we were doing a good job with the 6 feet. We were doing a good job with masks. We were doing a good job with plexiglass, all that stuff. So.
Mr. Berry, recognition of school board members.
So the Ohio School Board Association every year sends us certificates to give to our well-deserving school board members for School Board Recognition Month. The school board, we mentioned our teachers, we mentioned our aides, we mentioned our bus drivers. You guys provide a great service to our school district, to our students, to our staff, and we appreciate everything you do. So at this time, I will walk around and drop these off, and Mr. DeCamp and Mrs. Wedding, I will make sure you get your certificates, but it's a certificate presented to North Union Local Schools in sincere appreciation for exemplary leadership and service to public schools. School Board Recognition Month, January 2021. So congratulations and thank all of you board members, and I'll make sure that everybody gets one of these. And I will.
Yep. And while Mr. Bear is doing that, I just want to say thank you for all, Mrs. Arrett and Mr. Staley and Mr. DeCamp and Mrs. Whiting. Thank you for your time. This is unprecedented what we've went through the last 10 to 12 months, and no board members in our lifetime will ever have to go through what the decisions that we've had to make as a board in the last 10 to 12 months. So I want to thank all of you for your trust in Mr. Baird and your trust in our administration and your trust in each other to power through this as a board, because it truly has been something that we've had to do together and as a team. And we would not be able to make that. Looking back, I think we've done a very, very good job of making sound decisions for our community and for our kids. So I just want to say thank you as well for all of your hard work. So anyone else wants to add?
Yes, Brian, and I'd like to thank you for helping us also to get through all this. So you're welcome.
No Tri-Rivers update this evening, and Mr. Baird, start talking.
Start talking this week is prevention tips for preschoolers. Explain the importance of good care of our bodies, eating right, exercising, and getting good night's sleep. Discuss how you can feel when you take care of yourself, how you can run, jump, and play, and even go to work for many, many hours. So that's for our preschoolers, and it goes right along the lines, Shelley, that you talked about, taking care of ourselves. So thank you.
All right, items of discussion. 7A, affirm the date and time of our next regular board meeting. Mrs. Whiting and Mr. DeCamp, that is going to be February 22nd. February 22nd at 6:30 at the North Union Administrative Offices. That will be February 22nd, not the 15th. And 7B, affirm the date and time of our board work session. That will be January 23rd. It's a Saturday morning at 9 a.m. And that again will be at the administrative offices. Item 8, correspondence and items to the public. Anybody address the board? Thank you. Recognition of guests, reception of visitors. Thank you again for all of your presentations this evening. And Cheryl is here with the Richwood Gazette sitting through this. A lot of information. So thank you, Cheryl, for being here. Item 10, call for modifications to the agenda.
We pull out B6.
Okay. Pull out B6 from the agenda. All right, any other modifications? Okay, thank you. Item 11, the following additions and revisions to board policy are being submitted for the first reading on the recommendation of the board policy committee. These were all in board notes.
And we don't have a meeting next month, right?
For policy, I think it might, no, we don't.
Okay,
We don't.
okay,
I think March will be the next one.
okay. I just wanted to clarify that.
Okay. Item 12, action items for consideration is recommended by the treasurer. A1, motion to approve consent items recommended by the treasurer as indicated. A2 and A3. I will entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion.
Mrs. Barrett, thank you.
Second.
Mr. Staley, second. Thank you. Any discussion? Okay. Hearing none, call the roll, please.
Mrs. Wedding,
Yes.
Mr. Davis,
Yes.
Mr. DeCamp,
Yes.
Mrs. Harret,
Yes.
Mr. Steele.
Yes.
Turn my mic on here. Let's start over. B1, motion to approve board action items included in the consent agenda as indicated. B2 through B14, pulling out B6 and B9, there is a change February 22nd. And now we're all on the same page. I will again entertain the motion. Mrs. Arrett, you had the initial motion? Okay. And I'll entertain a second.
Second.
Mr. DeCamp, thank you. Any discussion? I said B14, actually it's B13. B2 through B13, not B14. I apologize. Hearing no discussion, Mr. Bruniak, we call the roll, please.
Mr. Davis,
Yes.
Mr. DeCamp,
Yes.
Mrs. Harret,
Yes.
Mr. Steele,
Yes.
Mrs. Wedding,
Yes.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, see, I missing the line there. Sorry, that's okay. So we'll go, again, board action items. Motion to approve board action items including the consent agenda. B14, motion to appoint Treasurer Scott Maruniak and Superintendent Rich Baird as board member representatives to fulfill House Bill 9 record training requirement. I will entertain a motion. Mr. Staley, thank you. Second.
I'll second it.
Mrs. Barrett. Any discussion? Okay, hearing none, call the roll, please.
Just real quick, if you want to vote this down, Rich and I would love it.
You want to do it this year, no new board members, right?
No, you don't. We don't.
It's got to be all online. You just.
Last year it actually was. They had some sessions that were online after COVID, but yeah, usually it's a 3-hour session. I'm not gonna lie to you, it's awful.
Well, we're not there.
Mrs. Eric. Mr. Staley.
Yes.
Mrs. Wooding.
Yes.
Mr. Davis.
Yes. And then board action items, B6, motion to approve the superintendent and treasurer to be paid for up to a maximum allowable per contract for vacation days annually in lieu of taking these days as vacation upon submission of a written request.
So moved.
Do I have a motion?
So moved. Right.
I guess I'll make a motion, but I thought I would like to make.
So if we want to table this agenda, Mr. Maruniak, or this motion to our work session,
I believe you have to have a motion to table. That's correct, Mr. Staley?
So if an agenda item is tabled at the next official meeting, it must be taken up.
Okay.
So.
We have to have a motion to table.
Motion to table the agenda item, but it must be taken up at the next official meeting.
And I think that's what we want to do. So do I just need to word it as, I'll entertain a motion as to table
So
B6?
someone needs to make item number B6.
I'll make a motion that we table B6, item B6.
Thank you. I will entertain a second to table motion for a motion to table item B6.
Second.
Mrs. Whiting, thank you. And then we also need to vote on that motion to table, correct? Okay, Mr. Maruniak, call the roll, please.
Mrs. Eric. Mr. Staley.
Yes.
Mrs. Wooding.
Yes.
Mr. Davis.
Yes.
Mr. DeCamp.
Yes.
B15, motion to hold an executive session. Anyone need to go to executive session? I've been here long enough. B16, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion that we adjourn.
Mrs. Eric, thank you. Second.
Second.
Mr. Staley, thank you. Mr. Maruniak, call the roll, please.
Yes. Yes.
Mrs. Wooding.
Yes.
Mr. Davis.
Yes.
Mr. DeCamp.
Yes.
Mrs. Eric.
Yes.
9 o'clock.
I'm
Have a
sorry.
great evening, everyone.
Second B14. You made the motion, Matt. So Shelley seconded. Okay. Thank you.
Hey, Scott. Scott, can you hear me?
Brad is trying to talk. Brad is trying to talk, I believe.
I may have missed it. I don't think my name was called. I don't think I heard it for one of the last things we voted on, maybe 2 items before we adjourned.
Was it B14 or was it the motion to table B6?
I don't think, it was one of those two. I can't remember. I don't remember hearing my name.
Okay.
B14, maybe Matt did that one?
Maybe it was Matt.
Yeah, I think he recorded your vote, Mr. DeCamp, as a yes.
That's fine.
on all those, B14 and table B6?
Yeah, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure I didn't hear it on one of them.
Okay, all right. Sorry about that.